and I hate to be so aggressive toward a guest at the very beginning of an episode.
No, I knew this was coming.
We're all, I think, going to have to denounce you right now, Alice. How fucking dare you make us play this game?
Listen, I have no regrets on this. All of you deserve this suffering, and I'm glad to make you experience this with me. Because I played this game a lot, probably too much. I've had to live with the consequences of that for a long time, and now in a sort of like it follows sort of thing, I've now spread that to you.
What would you carve into your skin in order to receive repentance for this, Alice?
I would carve the entire text of IGN's review of this game, like sort of Victor Zaz style, like into my back, you know?
We're all gathered here today, I think, to prostrate ourselves before the great god of Ubisoft and acquire enough cult points to eventually encounter the region boss for the area. And I think all we have to do is like blow up one more convoy. And wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What's? Do you guys hear that?
Yeah. Yes.
Amazing grace. How sweet the sound.
Oh, God.
They took off his pop filter for this.
A wretch like me.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only ASMR podcast. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm Mickey Mouse.
Come on, no.
You're the Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse specifically.
That was the bit last week.
And
you
playing
can't do the
crazy.
same bit 2 weeks in a row.
It's not
Brian.
a bit. I am Mickey Mouse.
He's the worst of all possible Bryans.
I'm the worst
And
of all possible Brians. I have to be myself again. Fuck you, Josh. Let me live in my fantasy.
We are excited this week because we have back as a guest a returning champion. She is the co-host of the podcasts Trashfuture, Kill James Bond, and Well, There's Your Problem. And returning to us for a third time to torment us with the game Far Cry 5. It is, of course, the one and only Alice Caldwell-Kelly. Alice, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to once again be the worst of all possible Alices.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing, though. You came on the first time. You bring us Hitman.
I do.
What
Great game.
a game we all love and
Remember
enjoy.
when we had a nice time? We all enjoyed it. We
such a
just
great time.
We were
And
having
then
fun.
once I kind of like reel you in, once I know that I've established that kind of level of like social interaction that makes it difficult for you to say no to me, I then start feeding you the worst shit I can think of. Actually, no, let me just sort of like shift the denunciation here. If we can still do denunciations.
Denounce me back. All right, let's go.
Because
let's
this
go.
isn't my fault. This is Josh's fault. Because you get Josh to invite me on, and when I speak to Josh, because I don't respect him, I will say, you should do this terrible game.
I never thought I would long for the halcyon days of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. And yet here we find ourselves in Far Cry, a game with a more incoherent story.
We're in Montana.
Get on your ghillie suits. We're going to the big sky. It is
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town, truly.
Yeah, and all of them have joined the cult. This cult has like 100,000 members at least. I killed like the population of like Butte, Montana, I'm pretty sure, over the course of playing this game. But it's shocking to me that when you said, Alice, that this was the worst game you've ever played, I was like, how bad could it possibly be?
It's not maybe the worst in terms of mechanics, but it is the worst maybe morally I've ever played.
Well, you've got, by the way, just I hate to interrupt you. It sounds like you've got like a reverb on. I don't know if that's a post-processing thing on your end.
Oh, yeah. No, I literally do because I had the fucking Call of Duty thing on. Sorry.
That's very exciting.
I'll just leave that on the whole time.
Add gravitas.
Yeah, so
AJ, I just want to issue a correction. correction. Butte, Montana has a population of 34,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
you kill all of them in this.
yes.
You kill all of them 3 or 4 times over.
A cult with 34,000 people. None of them are barbers. All of them have the Red Dead Redemption 2, this guy's crazy beard hair combo.
Yo, absolutely. And you know, what a diverse cult they have. You know,
They're very diverse. Yeah.
They bring in all walks of life because God forbid we denounce white nationalists.
I'm doing the DEI sort of presentation at the cult.
Like, on one hand, they're trying to draw a reference to like Cliven Bundy's cult. And then on the other hand, they're doing, you know, the People's Temple, right? They're doing Jim Jones, and that was a very diverse and nominally anti-racist cult. They're just sort of throwing everything in a sort of cosmic cult gumbo here. The classic Montana gumbo.
Yes.
It's just all testicles, the whole thing.
Love those bull testicles. It is so funny that you read interviews with Dan Hay, and like one of the interviewers asked him, like, so what research did you do about cults and about like nationalism in the US? And he literally says, I don't want to tell you what resources we used, but we did do a lot of research. The James Somerton of video game development. They sent people to Montana. They sent people to bars in Montana to have a beer with the locals and have them tell them about all like the stories of what it's like to grow up there.
I feel so bad for the like developers who get sent on these research trips. I'm not that bad because they get a free vacation, but like if you're sort of like interested in what you're producing and you go on this like 2-week vacation where you start in like Missoula or whatever, and you take a bunch of like really high resolution photos, and what you see in sort of like finished product is they have gotten the arrangement of signs over the jukebox in one bar correct, and the rest of it is nothing like anything you saw.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like, you know, aiming for some sort of visual fidelity, but not really understanding what the thing is. And I think this is an interesting maybe way into just talking about Far Cry as a series.
Yeah, I mean, basically what this was back in the day, right, of the early 2000s, it was not sort of settled who the big like FPS game developers were going to be, and you had, you know, like it was a lot easier and cheaper to make those games, and you had a lot of smaller developers doing it. You know, Far Cry is one of those, and then subsequently it got subsumed by this sort of like French Canadian behemoth.
Yes.
And what we're talking about is sort of like the decline after that. Yes.
Yeah, because Far Cry started, it was made by Krauts. You know, it was made by Crytek while they were working on the Crytek engine, which then became the sort of like benchmark standard thing for high fidelity graphics and whatnot.
The thing about Far Cry, the original game, is that I wouldn't say that it's an excellent game, but it's a very impressive glorified tech demo.
Yeah.
With pretty good gunplay.
It originated a few things that you now kind of take for granted, like this sort of like open world-ishness of it, of like being able to like see an outpost full of guys, sort of reconnoiter it ahead of time, be like, this is how I'm going to go about clearing this outpost full of guys, and then doing it.
Early pioneer of like mark and track. Where like you pull out your binoculars, you get
so
a
that
look.
was even in Far Cry 1.
Yes,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
was.
Didn't work
that was
hugely well, but it was there.
definitely one of the earliest ones where you can use your binoculars, you can look at a group of guys, and they will then, all of the guys who you've looked at will be visible on your little radar in the corner. After Far Cry came out, and that was in 2004, Crytek and Ubisoft broke up. Crytek signed with EA to make Crysis, but Far Cry being a pretty popular game, Ubisoft was like, well, what can we do with this? And so they put their own team on it, Ubisoft Montreal, to port the game to the Xbox and then begin developing sequels.
And that Xbox port is in many ways just a different game. It's a linear game because they couldn't really do that open world stuff on the first Xbox. It also added like, because that game is about like genetic experimentation on animals and stuff, it gives you little like animal abilities where you can like scratch people to death, which until playing this, I thought that's what the Far Cry franchise was about becoming a manimal.
And it was very manimal
Brian
focused.
was sending us a lot of like questions, being like, "Why can't I scratch people? Why can't I bite people?" And I was like, "I don't know what game you're talking about."
Sort of the point of this game is that being in Montana takes away your manimal powers.
Right.
Yeah. Also, AJ, I was not texting you about the game. I was asking questions about.
I was going to say, like, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you.
That's true.
The police, maybe.
Yes.
If you're slow.
Fucking Eric Adams. So yeah, the console game came out, and then it gets like remade a couple of times and sort of boosted and expanded. And this becomes like a typical thing for this franchise and for anything Ubisoft does. So it starts out on Xbox. Then they make a little sequel to it. The sequel gets packaged with the original console version on Xbox 360. And then a Wii version comes out, and all of that is in 2006.
Yeah, sort of throw the Wiimote through your window to become the Manimal.
That was my question. Like, how functional was that game?
They had a Manimal attachment with little claws.
Aw.
Oh, no.
Blood everywhere.
Yeah, because those claws really sharp.
The Far Cry series, then, in terms of finding its identity, really is more strongly established with the release of Far Cry 2, which comes out in 2008.
I'm going to put down a marker
sequel.
here. This is maybe one of the best games I've ever played. And I didn't make you talk about this one for 3 hours because, as I stressed enough, I don't respect you or your time. Get me back on to talk about this at some point, because I think this was genuinely really inventive, and a lot of the ways in which it was difficult and frustrating to play. You can do the kind of like Simpsons comic book guy thing and be like, no, you don't understand it. It's doing that on purpose.
Yeah, like weapons broke. You could get malaria.
Yep, you could. You absolutely could get malaria.
What?
It was sort of like partially malaria-focused storyline.
Is it like Oregon Trail? Like you just be playing the game to go dun dun, and it says your character has malaria.
Honestly, a little bit more like pathologic, where like you have to go
it's
back.
a lot like pathologic.
Get some hydroxychloroquine and pop that so that you can get rid of your malaria.
It's a story about how sort of being a mercenary in Africa and being the sort of protagonist of a first-person shooter game is pathological and toxic. It's great. And I sort of fell in love with the series at a very young age here, and from that point on, I was like very much on board the Ubisoft train. And I was like, oh, the future is just where everything is inevitably owned by Ubisoft. I was very into Assassin's Creed at the same time. Eventually, like one world government, eventually video games will be where you log into Uplay, you unlock like stuff within your video games based on other of their video games you've played. You unlock Aiden Pierce's iconic cap from Watch Dogs. This is the way it's all heading.
We do love Aiden Pierce from Watch Dogs, the single most iconic character in all
easily
of video
the most iconic cap, certainly. And so I was doing this. I was playing Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 3, being a teenager, buying the Assassin's Creed 3 branded hoodie, which I thought was cool because it had the little peak on the hood.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, I'm so excited for Far Cry 3. It's looking great. And this is where the disillusionment begins.
In terms of sort of what they took away from Far Cry 2, as far as like what a Far Cry game is, they discarded some of the like super tactical and more linear nature of OG Far Cry, which in many places is just a corridor shooter, honestly, and puts more of an emphasis on open world exploration, adaptive gameplay, and of course that's things like the breakable weapons and what have you.
Setting stuff on fire. They had a very, very advanced fire system for the time where you could just like throw a Molotov into sort of like some dry brush and watch it like spread and set a guy on fire and be like, yeah, fantastic.
And also really doubling down on this idea of like larger than life villains, right? Where it really is the villains in many cases who are driving the storytelling for you.
Yes,
sure. And this is especially the case with Far Cry 3, which came out in 2012, returning the environment of the game back to the tropics, as well as Far Cry 4, which came out in 2014. That's set in the Himalayas.
I will say this, 4 solidly good. It's very, very in that kind of like Ubisoft locked in paradigm of what the gameplay is going to be like. But if you want to play one of these that isn't Far Cry 2, I think 4 is your best bet for like something you will have a good time with and enjoy. Right. 3, I mostly remember as the sort of creative director getting very, let's say, exuberant in interviews when challenged about any aspect of it, like the sort of strange racism or homophobia.
Yeah, because Far Cry 3 is sort of like Dances with Wolves, but then it turns out that the natives are evil at the end.
Yeah, it's trying to make a statement about video games, but in a much dumber way.
It sets a lot of standards
That's
for like
a theme that will repeat throughout the franchise.
Yeah.
Like Far Cry 1 and 2, and then the other games that were released in that era are sort of their own set of things, but Far Cry 3 is the standard bearer. It's the thing that makes the recipe for all the following Far Cry games. So you have your main villain who's played by a really good actor who gets to monologue at you a lot. In Far Cry 3, Voss is played by Michael Mondo.
Yep.
Before he did Better Call Saul.
Yeah, sort of a career maker for him.
Far Cry 4, the villain is Pagan Min, played by Troy Baker.
And this is where they really like lock in this idea of like a Far Cry game is when a guy who is unusual is looking way too close at the camera and sort of monologuing.
And acting so hard.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
And it's like, do you get that design brief? Both at the acting end and at the sort of the writing end, or not, right? And Far Cry 4 is an example of somebody who is getting that brief and is leaning into the idea of like, oh, this is ridiculous, right? This is melodrama.
Yeah, so there's also, hallucination, like dream sequences. This becomes a standard thing in all of these games.
Madness.
And wild animal attacks, and the way that they can attack you, they can attack your enemies. There's hunting that gets put into this. And then also like these big paid expansions, sometimes DLC, sometimes standalone titles, sort of like Alan Wake American Nightmare, where you don't have to buy the base game. But Far Cry 3 had this thing called Blood Dragon.
Yes.
Where they sort of reskinned it, made it 80s and neon lit, and it sold very well. And then that's become this thing that that Ubisoft just keeps doing.
Yeah, one of the things that they did was something that Ubisoft is very fond of and something that they keep trying to make happen, which is this idea that you alternate between every few years you make the big AAA game, right? The big like set piece, like a numbered Far Cry or a numbered Assassin's Creed.
Right.
And then in the off year between those, you release a AA game that's like the same franchise but shorter. So it's like it's a piece of DLC for Far Cry, it's Assassin's Creed Mirage, it's something like that, where it's like you can develop it much more cheaply and it sort of like fills out some other aspect of the story. And that was always interesting because in the Assassin's Creed series, that was the place where they kind of like really rat fucked all of their own diversity stuff, because they were like, you get mainline Assassin's Creed game that has all the money spent on it, and then you get diverse Assassin's Creed game that gets like 25% of the funding, and we're exploring this stuff and it's sort of like, okay, I think we can see what's happening here.
This is also not dissimilar from Activision, right? Although at this point, with the way that game development is in just the sheer volume of resources that are necessary to make those quarterly numbers, the differentiation just isn't really there anymore for Activision.
Right.
Whereas I feel like for Ubisoft, it still kind of is.
Although I think it's stopping now. I think there was enough backlash to some of the Assassin's Creed properties getting put out, and they were, it was just like too frequent. And it was affecting their sales because, it wasn't, you need a little bit of hype to build up for a while. And they were just sort of putting out a new Assassin's Creed game. And of course, like bugs and things like that, it was becoming more of a critical target.
Yeah.
And
not to keep talking about Assassin's Creed on this, but like the sort of
it's important.
The end game for Ubisoft with this has been that they would do Mirage, which was the like one last AA game, kick the can down the road far enough until they could do Assassin's Creed Infinity, which was like the whole game as a service, doing the Hitman thing, right? Where like all of your future games are within this like over game.
And that's what's happening with Far Cry 6 and whatever Far Cry is going to be in the future, because all the big expansions for 6, instead of being standalone games like Blood Dragon or Primal, the caveman one off of 4,
interesting
or
AA one,
New Dawn,
Far Cry 5
not
sequel,
interesting
New Dawn.
I'll talk about New Dawn.
Yeah.
Far Cry 5 also had 3 DLCs. One was a Vietnam War thing, one was a Mars thing, and one was a zombie thing. Years after the zombie thing.
The Vietnam War one, Hours of Darkness, I still know that off the top of my head, was featured maybe the funniest thing, which is you're like a US GI stuck behind enemy lines in North Vietnam who is being pursued by the North Vietnamese helicopters.
Great.
Yeah, it shows sort of the research and rigor that we can expect from the main game that is carried over into the DLC.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, Far Cry as a series asks the very like haunting question of what if you put Assassin's Creed in the first person? Because that's all it really is. It's you running around and like climbing to the highest point and revealing points on a map and then going off and doing objectives. It's just now you have gun and now you drive car.
AJ, you're more of an Assassin's Creed guy, aren't you? Or
Yes,
okay,
yes,
that's what
yes.
I thought.
Much more. But I also dropped off pretty heavily.
Had you played in a Far Cry game before we went and did this one?
Yes, I played exactly 20 minutes of Far Cry 4, and then I stopped because I got attacked by a cougar and died. And then I went and tried to fight the same cougar again and died and went, this isn't for me. And full disclosure, sort of for the rest of this episode, I just don't know if these games are for me. I don't know if this style of game is my particular cup of tea, because stealth in the first person is always a little bit tricky for me. And in this game, I pretty quickly discovered that you can stealth if you want to, or you can just hire 2 attack helicopters to do the mission for you. Yeah. And then walk in and claim the base for yourself. Like, I went into this game sort of with that same trepidation of being like, well, I didn't like Far Cry 4, and Alice has said this is the most morally reprehensible game she's ever played. Like, what, how bad could this possibly be? And the answer was the worst gaming experience I think I've had in a very long time. For everything bad I said about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, at least the plot had like twists and turns that I could follow.
Which sure did.
And it had characters. I didn't necessarily care about many of them, but it did have characters that people seemed to care about. This game, you're just kind of a nameless deputy.
A nameless non-binary deputy.
Yeah, being a non-binary sheriff's deputy in sort of rural Montana sounds like about as many people would try to shoot you as doing this. So,
we do love a canonically NB protagonist.
Sure.
You are
Yes.
exclusively referred to using they, them, and it pronouns.
true. The woke cult.
Let's talk a little bit about Far Cry 5 now.
Let's
'cause
not.
I was so on the hype train for this because
did the trailer get you when they released
had,
that?
Yeah, they had a few trailers and a few little like micro sort of spots and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like we're taking this kind of like Far Cry 4 thing because this was, you know, hot off of that, and we're gonna do some like villainy in modern rural America. And I'm like, well, shit, that's a place with a lot of villainy. There are some interesting places you can go with this, and I still believe one of the reasons why this game annoys me so much is that there are so many more interesting ways you could have played this exact same idea.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a spectacular premise.
Yeah.
And it really, I didn't have a console and I still don't have a computer that can really play AAA games. I remember seeing the trailers for this and it seemed really interesting, and it just happened to come out at the right time, sort of like Wolfenstein 2. It was just like Donald Trump had been elected president of the United States somewhat unexpectedly, and these games that were already in the pipeline for a number of years were coming out. Night in the Woods as well from like the independent side, where it looked like, oh, this is the perfect thing talking about the Trump era, when it was really built up during the Obama era.
Yeah, and the early sort of trailers were really subtle, and subtlety has not really been a marker of the Far Cry series since 2, right? Where they just had like sort of rural vistas with like sort of like insinuations of violence, like, you know, dead body drifting down the sort of like beautiful trout stream or whatever. And because they didn't tell you anything, that leaves you the room to sort of imagine a better game.
Well, and those visuals, you know, juxtaposed with religious music and really this strong sense of like, oh, maybe we are going to have a somewhat trenchant look at, you know, a weird evangelical Christian question mark thing, or at the very least, maybe an interesting Christian cult of some sort. Maybe we're going to interrogate the way that reactionary ideas and militaristic ideas have found a foothold in the Western United States. And the hype train definitely was building around this thing, because that first trailer was released in May of 2017. So again, just a few months after Trump's inauguration.
Worth mentioning Wolfenstein too, since you don't think that's not, because like I think we were kind of spoiled by that. Because I know now you can look back and say that like you have to shoot Nazis is if anything, sort of it's aged to the point of mildness, but it was able to be made in the form that it was. I think it gave me and a lot of other people hope that, like, oh, okay, so there are, video game developers are willing to take this risk and, like, say this with their whole chest.
I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack the podcast much like one of the lieutenants does, no matter what you're doing mid-game, if you get enough cult points.
I love cult points, dude. They're my favorite kind of points.
We love cult points. And I want to kind of frame this up for like the initial hype train around this, right? That starts, in 2017, in May of 2017. There are articles that start coming out around this time. There's a big push, and they do a lot of interviews with Dan Hay, who is the creative director of
It's actually
Far Cry
pronounced
5.
Dan Hay.
Thank you.
Hey,
You beat me to it, Josh.
this first one, Alice, I was wondering if you would indulge us and read this one.
by
This
all
is
means.
from a Kotaku article.
So Dan Hay says here, Far Cry 5 was also pitched to press framed against some scene-setting real-world anxiety. The approach has become Ubisoft tradition for their recent games. They debuted Watch Dogs and The Division with reels about the real-world threats of cybersecurity and bioterrorism, for example. Hay began his wholesale demo of Far Cry 5 with a 5-minute monologue about growing up in the 80s, living under the threat of nuclear annihilation, and feeling relief in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell and the Cold War threat seemed to vanish. He said that he recently began to feel anxiety about the state of the world once again. He cited the stock market crash of 2008, the seizure of a federal building by a militia in Oregon last year, and Brexit, all as manifestations of a splintering society that is focused more on us versus them and is increasingly skeptical of government. He pitches the game as one about society standing on a precipice. Ooh. And it's very interesting that he mentioned the sort of the reel for The Division, because I don't know if you've played The Division. Genuinely, the sort of like intro movie they start The Division with about how this sort of pandemic breaks out and sort of destroys civil society in New York is really well done, and it's sort of like, at the time, it like gave me chills. And then the rest of the game is just like Ubisoft MMO. A guy wearing like a shitload of armor, carrying a minigun, walks around sort of yelling at you while you shoot bits of armor off him. Fine, whatever. So that's sort of like the paradigm that I'm now used to from Ubisoft, is like, you set out your stall with this like, oh, we're going to talk quite trenchantly about like real frightening things and sort of engage those. Then the guy with the minigun comes out and you have to shoot the bits of armor off of him.
So in that quote, right, we have like all this stuff that sounds very intriguing. There's all this anxiety from like the militia in Oregon and like, Brexit, I guess. Like this, a splintering society, things are going awry.
Yeah.
Little weird that he brings up the Cold War, but that's fine. A little weird.
All the anti-government sentiment that the Soviet Union government had
in 2016.
Well,
yes.
I feel like this is just a good example of like a dumb guy's idea of a smart thing to say.
Yeah.
Sure.
And apologies to Dan Hay. I don't know him personally, but
No. But
I
here's
will
the
not
thing.
apologize to apologize to Dan Hay, my ass. I will not apologize
He
to
owes
Dan Hay.
you an apology.
Because here's the thing, right? All that sounds vague enough that you're like, oh, okay, they could do something very interesting with it, in the way that when you watch the first trailer, you're like, oh, okay, there might be something interesting here. But then he kind of kept talking. So this is from an article called Far Cry 5 First Look, a Montana Uprising by Ryan McCaffrey during the same push. It came out the same day as that Kotaku article, right?
The key for us is to make sure that when we build our world, we populate it with characters that have their own views, he explained. And those views compete. You go out into the world, and even when you think about the conversation between two characters in the beginning of the game, you're listening to this and you're like, who's right? Who is the person you should follow in this?
Damn.
Who's right? And the answer is, it's not clear. Editor's note, we don't know yet if you'll be able to make these kinds of moral decisions during the course of the game.
Spoilers! You won't!
no.
The world is sometimes messy and sometimes bumpy and filled with opinions. And if we do it right, if we build a world that has the same thing.
The world is sometimes messy and sometimes bumpy and filled with opinions is something the worst assistant principal in the world says after trying to break up a fight.
Right. And this is the point where you're listening to Dan Hay and the smile on your face starts to wane a little bit. And you're like,
Oh,
what?
not me. I walked into this thing like Wile E. Coyote. I was so convinced I was going to have a great time.
The world is filled with opinions. We're going for it.
Yeah.
That's a line that Neri Oxman would plagiarize.
Oh, the halcyon days of 2017.
Everything was going so well back then.
So well.
A year passes. We get a lot more like hype leading up to this. People are very excited about this game. Right before the game is released, he does an interview with Thomas McMullan at Alphr.
I think it's Aspire.
Is it Aspire? I've always said Asper.
I've always said
it's
Alphr.
It's Aspire because like you aspire to port the
That
game
makes
well.
sense.
Well,
That's
they should
better, yeah.
aspire to spell it right. Then.
You should aspire to eat these nuts, motherfucker.
That's like fucking. That's like fucking infogrames.
Infograms.
Well, speaking of these nuts, the interviewer asks Dan Hay, what is a very, very, very small detail in the game that you take great joy in? And Josh, I'm wondering if you could read this for us.
Absolutely. Well, there are a lot of things floating around in my head. If I just take the first picture that pops into my head, it's getting bull testicles for the testy festy and hearing a very specific type of music come on in the middle of that mission. I just can't get it out of my head.
Oh, no.
That is the exact reaction, Alice. Oh, no.
It should also be said that, there is a mission where you go and get Rocky Mountain oysters for this restaurant. And it's a very sort of, I guess, Rockstar game type premise where it's like, look at these goofy locals and their strange habits and their strange ways. But it's not funny.
Right.
No.
It's just like, let's go get testicles.
Yeah, just sort of like completely deadpan. The thing is, right, Far Cry 3 had this moment that people liked of like, because it was epic, apparently, of burning down weed fields with a flamethrower. And Skrillex started playing as you got higher from the weed that you were burning.
This is epic.
Exactly. And so since then, I think it's been on the list of like things that make a Far Cry game, along with like guy gets way too close to your face. What you have to do is you have to have an iconic moment with like one song. And I think they tried to do that with this, and I don't fucking remember it, so it can't have been that iconic.
That's the thing. I don't remember it either.
Skrillex again. I don't know.
Skrillex louder this time.
There are more than just one of those moments. I mean, I was floored when I got to the end of the game and watched the credits and saw the sheer number of songs they licensed for this game.
They licensed a bunch, and they recorded
a bunch,
whole album, not just your typical soundtrack album of like we've hired one guy to do the soundtrack. We maybe even have a couple of songs with vocals on them. No, they have an entire album of like choral Militia songs, and we'll get back to that later.
It's really
that
good.
Music is great, and I love it.
It is, and there's a real problem with that, which is actually I'll talk about this now. Which is one of them, and this is going to be a major problem with Far Cry 5 that we'll talk about more. One of them became really popular with the guys they were trying to depict apolitically. The song "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side" became based in trad, and it became a meme amongst those people.
Yeah, it's sort of like Tomorrow Belongs to Me from Cabaret becoming an actual Nazi anthem.
Exactly. They just handed them this free song.
They didn't hand me anything. I had to pay money for this stupid dog shit.
Interestingly, when the game was released, some people seemed to feel that way, but for the most part, reviews were positive, right? The game came out in March of 2018, and I think the Metacritic average is like in the high 8s, but the thing is, when you actually read the reviews, they're positive in the sort of vague way that AAA game reviews are always positive. And if you drill down and look at the reviews from people who are willing to actually be somewhat critical, such as Polygon, they are considerably more negative. Polygon gave it a 6.5.
Which is pretty damning. And I mean, this was like, not to be all ethics in video games, right? But like, this was the first thing that really made me feel insane about the sort of like gaming press. And not that I think it's like entirely sewn up, but I think there's a shitload of pressure, explicit and not, to make you convince yourself you're having a good time. A lot of the reviews were like, I'm having an epic time with this sort of NPC face.
But here's the 6.5, and Alice, actually, do you want to just read this quote that I pulled here from the review?
Means. Far Cry 5 uses the religious and isolationist divides in America to set up a story without ever addressing their history and their very present danger, and the story seems to give most of your enemies a get-out-of-jail-free card to explain their actions. They weren't bad, they were just drugged. And the main antagonist, well, if you hadn't picked a fight, maybe none of this would have happened.
We'll dig further into that, especially once we talk about the ending itself. Because
the ending, which made me angrier than any piece of video game writing does. The writer of that ending, still, I believe, has me blocked on Twitter because I wouldn't stop yelling at him about it.
Oh,
that's
nice.
the one time I've really leaned into cyberbullying this poor fucking guy. Yeah, I became toxic, and I just kept fucking adding this guy to be like, this is the dumbest, most reprehensible shit you could possibly have done with this.
I have this image in my head of him hitting the final period at the end of the sentence, having written the ending, and then blaring Skrillex and jizzing so hard that there's
setting
just
a wheat field on fire.
Wall. Yeah, truly, it's epic in the way that a 13-year-old graffitiing a wall with fuck is epic. Yeah. You know what I mean? It thinks it's so cool, man.
13-year-olds graffitiing fuck is kind of, I think, the target audience for this game, or at least people who are maybe mentally still in that space. This Polygon review, was one that also sparked quite a bit of controversy among capital G gamers. Right?
Yeah, because when this game was coming out, when the hype cycle was going, it really looked like this game was going to be doing the Wolfenstein 2 thing, was going to be critiquing American patriotism, American Christianity, the American right in general. And so the gamers were very mad. And the gamers wanted this to stop. And so you had all of the sort of right-wing grievance mill shit talking about how they weren't saying woke so much yet. They were still just saying SJW at this point. But it was all SJW brainwashing and postmodernism and all of those scary boogeyman words. And then the game comes out and it's incoherent, and we get some reviewers from the woke gaming press who are like, this game is fucking incoherent. And they're like, triggered, lib? You're triggered? It has gone so far around now that Far Cry 5 is a based and red-pilled game.
It's true. Yeah.
I was just finding the worst tweets imaginable and just sharing them with Josh and AJ on Slack yesterday. I mean, there's someone replying to an Ian Miles Chong tweet talking about how people today it's just like that cult in Far Cry 5, where they're all brainwashed and they're all wearing masks. But then you have the other people who are, of course, singing the songs and they're praising the cult. And they're like, actually, the cult was right. They don't have a coherent message on this other than the gaming press got triggered. Therefore, this game is based and red-pilled. But Far Cry 6 is woke. I saw another set of people who were talking about how New Dawn, it's actually good, even though it looks woke because it has two black women on the cover of it. But they're like, no, it's not actually woke.
It's about
good.
hunting them down and killing them. It's not woke.
What I will say about New Dawn is at least it has a color palette that looks pleasing in a way that this game just kind of looks very drab.
Yeah, sort of like Blood Dragon. They always apply a palette to the little spin-off games that they do and then go back to just trees and dirt.
Yeah, it's a weirdly barren world that you're in.
I mean, it is Montana, but the thing is that it doesn't do anything interesting with that sort of barrenness or that emptiness.
We see that honestly from the very beginning. When we begin the game, we start right in the middle of a basically non-interactive cutscene where you are a deputy sheriff.
Yep, you're the non-binary reserve deputy.
Canonically non-binary. Yes, I cannot emphasize this highly
It's
enough.
part of the Montana non-binary core. It's specifically, it's a long cultural history thing. It started with the Mormon settlers, actually, where deputies have to be non-binary.
I mean, one thing I will say is that this game does have the least consequential character customization of its generation.
Yes,
You can choose your haircut and your outfit and stuff. And the thing is, right, I love that shit in a video game. Rainbow Six Vegas one of my favorite video games because it is tactical Barbie, right? And so you give me a character customization system, and I'm like, I'm going to customize the fuck out of that character. I'm going to spend hours on it, and then never ever comes up again.
There's no reflective surface even to look in to see your
even
person.
Cyberpunk has a mirror that you can turn on every now and then. Like, this game is just like, you can spend real money on
and
fucking clothes that you'll know.
I will have to answer for this when I die. Is why did you spend money on microtransactions for like weapon paints and clothing in Far Cry 5? And my answer is, I don't know. I'm stupid.
Some of the guns in this game look pretty good on the model screen. It's just when you're using them in combat, it's just such a small part of the screen.
Yeah,
it's so
yeah. I mean, I do have some thoughts about the guns as well, because this is like the major part of the game is like gunplay, right?
You're just shooting people. That's the whole game.
So it has like a lot of weapons that you can sort of modify and customize a bit, and they're all suffering from a sort of case of Ubisoft artist disease, right? Where it's not that I'm doing the sort of comic book guy thing again of like being, this is not accurate, but they're not accurate in a way that doesn't really make any sense. And because I am very neurodivergent, there is a website called IMFDB, the Internet Movie Firearms Database, and you can get properly into this stuff. This is I use it a lot for Kill James Bond, and they do video games too. And it's genuinely, it's like they decided, okay, we'll do some writing on that. So the IMFDB pages for every Far Cry game are genuinely, sort of quietly, some of the best special interest writing I found on the internet.
Wow. You won't get access to most of them at the very beginning because the beginning keeps you pretty strictly on rails, right? You basically get para-dropped into the cult headquarters, right?
You fly in with the U.S. Marshals, every outhouse, henhouse, etc., into Hope County, Montana, where, as you understand it, there's a warrant out for the arrest of the leader of this cult, who have, as you see this as you fly in, have built a gigantic statue of him.
Right. It's like Cristo Redentor, but it's that guy.
Yeah. Just like without anyone noticing.
Welcome to Columbia, everyone. We're back in BioShock Infinite.
Pretty much. It's a very similar feel. And the main character, the main villain, right? His name is Joseph Seed.
Formerly Chuck.
Good one. That's a really good sim. Yeah.
I've been waiting all week to do that one.
That's very good.
I don't mean to give writerly notes, but if you're crafting a villain I'm supposed to take seriously, maybe don't name him after jizz.
Yeah, Joseph Cum, yeah.
We have to arrest Joseph Seed here in his temple, in his inner sanctum. And in classic AAA video game fashion, you can press F to handcuff, or you can just wait to handcuff him.
This is a thing. It's been a thing for a couple of Far Cry games where they would give you a kind of Easter egg bonus ending where if you just don't do anything, the story works itself out by yourself. Like the opening of Far Cry 4 is you were invited to dinner, you have to break out of that dinner. If you just choose to sit and wait with the crab rangoon, then the story plays itself out and you get a little achievement, and sort of like the gaming press are like, that's so cool, and we can write this up in our sort of SEO driving how to get the secret ending in Far Cry 4.
So they just did the exact same thing.
Yes.
For the next game.
If you just do nothing, you get a weird vibe off of the guy and you go, okay, maybe we shouldn't arrest this guy, and you just leave and everything's fine.
National Guard is sent in. Like, this whole thing kind of works itself out, and it is actually the only canonically good ending in this game, is to walk away and do nothing, because what the thesis of this game is, spoilers, is just you should not mess with cults. Let them do their thing. It will cause more harm than good to stop them.
But sort of like waggling their eyebrows provocatively and being like, what if the cult has some points? What if the cult's right? What if this guy, maybe he actually is the Messiah?
How complex. What a complicated story to think, I'm doing one thing, but maybe, the other thing.
Who is the person you should follow in this? Who is right?
Who can say? Many complex moral choices. So let's talk about Joseph Seed here.
Yeah.
Let's
He's Carl Lentz from Hillsong Church.
Kind of. Like he's got like aviators.
He's got the fucking glasses. He's got the cum gutters.
Yeah, David Koresh had these glasses because everyone had these glasses back in the day. And yeah, his deal is that he kind of like is shirtless a lot of the time. He has a man bun, and he gets way too close to you and kind of like intones cult-likely. Yes. If that's a word, it isn't.
Yeah, where these other characters get too close to the camera and they have monologues, he does it too, but like nothing happens in his monologues or any of the monologues you will encounter in this entire game.
A shopping list too. He may as well be like right up in your face, just like doing the big glasses, kind of creepily going like in the strip club, straight up jerking it.
AJ, can you hit us with a little bit of that like Joseph Seed goodness? I feel like you're sort of dialed into his whole deal.
I'm getting really close to the microphone. Here we go. Okay. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. You, my friend, are the land. And I, my dear deputy, was blind, but now I see.
It's pretty good.
That's what he needed the glasses for.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about Joseph Seed
The Book of Eli is in Braille.
He just kind of does that. Like, he's just got these long ass monologues where he's staring at you.
Every time you kill one of the bosses, you get like a red toned scene of him in the dark, like in Run Lola Run,
being like, "I'm sorry, Mario, our princess is in another castle."
But yeah, he's known as the father. Yep. He is this sort of Koreshite person that they conveniently leave the part about David Koresh being a massive fucking pedophile out of this.
But again, like the game is being like, what if this guy is right?
Right.
So what if the pedophiles are onto something?
Yeah, put that on the cover next to the fucking scores, you know?
There are so many ways that they could lean into the way that this guy is fucked up. Yeah. And it sort of does, but the moment that it's really about to get somewhere with the specificity of who this guy is and why he's fucked up, it backs right off again. Because it doesn't want to, I don't know if it's condemn the character, it doesn't, but it's trying to do this moral ambiguity thing, but rather than being morally ambiguous, it's just vague.
Yeah, because he has a family, kind of.
Yeah, he's
you
got
find
3
out some,
siblings.
Right.
Yeah, and you find out some complications around that, particularly once you get into Faith's chapter. But like they're like they're framed at the church, and you're like, oh, this is the boss rush, right?
Right.
You're looking at them and saying, okay, so I'm gonna have to do every single one of their things. And their designs, I actually think, are pretty cool, especially once you learn what each one of the siblings' deals are. Like once you find out that John carves sins into people and then rips off their flesh, right? You see Joseph covered in like sins that have been carved into his skin, but they have not been ripped off because he is going to be like Jesus and be the sacrificial lamb and take all of those sins carved onto him with him to his death and sacrifice himself for the good of mankind. At least that's what he like proclaims. And that I think is a really lovely piece of like just design storytelling because there isn't any storytelling happening outside of the design.
No, what we do get is basically an encounter here with Joseph, who leads all of the people of the town to take down your helicopter with the marshals in it. There's sort of a surreal moment where he's like looking at you and he's like, oh, I'm... and
this marshal is also like extra itchy the whole time. He's like, let's just get this fucking done, because he's he's the guy from outside. He doesn't understand our ways. Yeah. You know, he's like, we just need to get this fucking guy and just get him, throw him, and kill everybody.
But already there's some ambiguity here, right? Is Joseph Seed actually a messiah? Does he actually have some sort of spiritual magical powers? Who can say? I just didn't care already. I was like 15 minutes into this game.
I was
like,
on board. I was still
really?
here.
Okay.
Yeah, I was down pretty much until I got through the tutorial
Okay.
and a couple hours out, and then I was like, oh, the whole game is going to be this.
Yeah.
All right.
So
all right.
it depends where you feel like it's kind of like runs out of steam. Because I was like a veteran of these games, I did the bullshit non-ending first.
Okay.
And so I went into actually playing it mad at how dumb the non-ending was. And so that kind of like colored it for me. But yeah, I think the sort of like the family thing, the array of bosses is like interesting. It's like interestingly designed. And yeah, I had the same kind of thing of like, oh, this could be promising. You know, I assume me and my friend, the US Marshal here, are going to like, you know, have to fuck all these guys up at like terrible cost to ourselves. And maybe go onto like the borders of madness and insanity and things like that. You know, I assume that'll be a sort of like well fleshed out thing that says something about American violence or yeah.
And maybe you get to explore each other's bodies in the process.
Yeah, maybe I get to suck a US Marshal's cock. Maybe that's what I get to do here. Yeah.
So you get this guy, you haul him out very slowly out of his compound. You get in the helicopter, it crashes, and then you get betrayed. This guy who was supposed to be with you, this marshal, he turns around and he's like, no, I'm on the side of the cult now for some mysterious reasons. And then you like sort of just run to the edge of the map and find a chain link fence and then just kind of find the exit to it. You're in the water and you get rescued by a guy named Dutch.
Yeah, but his name should be Canadian.
Everyone's Canadian in this fucking game.
Yeah, but this guy's super Canadian.
He's the most Canadian.
He keeps talking about cult outposts, and I mean,
he goes to the outpost. Yeah, you can cast Canadians. That's fine, but they have to do if it's gonna be set in fucking Montana.
They better sound like they're from fucking Montana.
With real American patriots who are fact checking all of my memes.
That's right. That's right.
They have to have an American goddamn accent.
A fun fact, actually, is that every Canadian actor in this game is actually just Mike Myers.
Interesting.
He'd show up to the recording session in different prosthetics because he kept assuming they didn't know it was him.
This was the moment this happened in a bunch of Ubisoft games, including Assassin's Creed, where you just like look at an NPC and be like, why are you from Quebec?
I looked him up because I was so curious. He is in fact born in the United States, but he was raised in Canada.
But he should know better then.
Yeah, but like just like throwaway lines, like you speak to like an NPC who's like a helicopter pilot or whatever, and he's like Dabanek, and you're like, what the fuck?
You just run into a guy and he's just eating a whole pepperoni in front of you, and it's like, come on.
Once we meet Dutch, this is how we get introduced to sort of the core gameplay loop. This tutorializes it.
Dutch, again, I want to drive this home. Dutch Roosevelt. His name is Dutch Roosevelt.
Yeah, I sure hope it does. You know, like
because he's a prepper, right?
He's a prepper. He's a right wing.
He's like
American.
a good prepper. He's like a kind of light-sided prepper.
Because this is a civil war between good preppers and bad preppers. Between classic George W. Bush Republicans and the bad new Donald Trump Republicans.
The sort of shorthand that the game gives us here for sort of his prepper ways is that he has been collecting rainwater without a permit. But, you know,
he got arrested for it.
But it's also
the woke sheriffs are trying to shut him down for this too.
Right.
He's got like a big American flag on the wall of the bomb shelter, you know.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, we don't want to portray this guy as being like totally loony. So we'll portray him as like being in conflict with the local government over something relatively trivial, right?
Water rights, which has never led anybody to try and like shoot Bureau of Land Management.
Right. It's a deeply weird opening because you're like, okay, I thought I knew who I was fighting in this game. At least I thought I knew who I was fighting, which was a cult of right-wing extremists. And what I've come to learn is that it's all Republicans. It's just that some have man buns.
Yeah, it's genuinely it's like militia cult thing versus never Trump also militia.
Yes. Yes. AJ, it's like you brought in your woke liberal agenda. Your inability to see nuance because you're gay and communist.
Yes.
This is a game about shades of gray, about, you know, about not just black and white morality, but purple and aubergine morality, you know?
Yeah. Are you saying that this is a journey that's taking us to the edge of madness?
It is. I feel like I'm already halfway there.
Are we about to learn the sort of difference between between insanity and sort of rationality here.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn, it is
Because you
going
are
to be
about
like
to
that.
do the same thing over and over again for
certainly are.
20
This is what
hours.
podcasting is, yeah.
Yeah, my
You know
whole
the
thing about
definition
this
of podcasting.
my whole thing about this opening area, right? Because you're confined to an island until you do like a very basic level tutorial. You go and clear out a couple of encampments and you climb a tower. And I was very excited because my big thing about any open world game is I like finding the tallest point and I like unlocking the map. That is a thing that I deeply actually love doing. And I know that a lot of people think it's very tedious, but I genuinely
a sexual thrill.
I do. I get so high. No one can be higher than me.
I do love
I'm
revealing a
with
map.
you.
That's my favorite
I'm
thing.
with you on this one.
Yeah.
This is one of the things. I think Far Cry 4 did this thing that was like quite trite even at that point quite well because it made each one into a little jumping puzzle. And I'm like,
Yes.
I love to do a little jumping puzzle. I love to climb up the thing, and I love to be sort of like introduced to a rich landscape of bullshit by virtue of sort of that way of doing it.
Yeah, and I was on board with this game up until the very moment because I was like, oh God, all the stuff with the cult was a little bit shaky. But then I get to the top of the tower. I'm like, finally, a thing I'm going to like. And the game makes fun of you for thinking that climbing a tower will actually unlock the map. And I'm like, you motherfuckers invented this. Don't yell at me. We're getting joy from your game.
Genuinely, the exact same thing as the like not ending, where what it is that they are aware that people are making fun of them for being formulaic, and so they do the formula and then laugh at you for expecting it.
Yeah.
Just to be very clear, the way that the map works in this game and reveals of the map, it will only ever reveal anything if you are on the ground or in the water.
You can be very close to the ground. I revealed some of the map in a helicopter.
Oh, okay. You can
They
be
literally
very
just put,
close
like
to
an
the
altitude ceiling on it.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of just like how routine all of this is for this kind of game, the tutorial is very weirdly, like it's giving you instructions, but it'll give you supplies at a time when you're not going to use them yet, and then just sort of expect you to know things. There are upgrades you get later on that you just have absolutely no clue like what the button is for them. And it's because it's kind of expecting you to have played 3 Far Cries before this. It's sort of like I the only Assassin's Creed I ever played was Black Flag, and I never made it very far in it because that game has the same exact expectation. It's like, we put one of these games out every 6 months. You should know how to play this game by now. And I'm like, I don't know. I just want to be in a boat.
There's no like remedial Assassin's Creed program. You know?
and I had played the original Far Cry, right? So the big piece of the core gameplay loop that has been there from the very, very beginning is that you find an outpost, right?
Yeah,
or
the
an
outpost.
outpost,
The
as
outpost,
Dutch likes to call it. Within that outpost, you will see a variety of guys. And what you can do is you can pull up your binoculars, you can zoom in on the guys. The guys will then be marked and tracked. And then it is up to you as to how you choose to infiltrate and liberate one of those outposts. Now, if you play like me in any game, you will be sort of scouting around, finding stealthy locations to pick guys off, hiding, doing something kind of stealthy. The game does support different approaches, though. You can go in with guns blazing as well if you want. There are also posts where people, if you have not destroyed them, they can run up to those posts and they can call in reinforcements. So you will want to disable those posts before you actually attack the guys.
Yeah. This is the bread and butter stuff to me, and because I have played all of the Far Cries, I have no criticisms of this because this is like I have a lobe of my brain dedicated to doing this. It's just like this is work to me.
Yeah.
I clock into the outpost liberation factory, and I just do the thing, and I have a great time.
It's like, it's cool, it's fun. I totally was like in the rhythm for this at the beginning, and then it just kept going. It just kept going. Again, I guess where we want to go next is to the southwest, right? So Josh on a couple of occasions has already said John Seed. That is because Joseph Seed, he has 3 brothers, or he has 3 siblings, sorry. John, Jacob, and Jingleheimer Schmidt. Actually.
Oh, yes.
What? His name is my name too. What?
Don't go out. Don't ever go out.
That's going to be hard for you if you do. You're going to have a real bad time.
And Faith. Faith is the third, the sister.
You can encounter them in any order that you choose because this is not a linear game.
Yeah.
Sort of. This is a quote unquote open world game in which you are able to go around and take missions in parts of the map that you choose in the order that you choose. We will be talking about this game sort of in the 3 parts in the order of John, Faith, and then Jacob.
The game tells you to deal with John first.
Yes.
The game is just like, you could go everywhere, do this, go through this entire story, and then do the rest of the game.
Yeah, it's John is also the one that sort of narratively kicks you towards, because he calls you on the bunker phone and is like, hey, what's up? I have kidnapped the other deputy.
Yeah, a character from the first scene who you already forgot existed.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like menacing her with a knife, and it's like, okay, cool.
Then do it. It's going to take me another 10 hours to fucking get to you.
So John Seed is a pervert and he's a sadist.
Yeah.
His big thing is that he detects what people's sins are, and then he carves the name of the sin into their flesh with a knife.
It's kind of really annoying, because if you are that person, eventually you're going to attain self-knowledge, and you're going to have to carve being a giant pervert / sadist into your own, like,
it's actually so many letters.
It's a lot like tattoos, you kind of run out of real estate, right? Like,
but this is also, I think, one of the big reasons why you're pointed to John first. I mean, they had to point you to someone first, but I think the reason it's John is because there's a pastor that you meet during this journey named Jerome Jeffries, and he's a gun-toting religious guy, but he doesn't use religion like that.
Yeah, he's a never Trump Republican pastor.
He's a machine gun preacher.
That's right.
Yeah, if you are someone who perhaps would take offense at a religious cult being the villain of a game,
right,
you can be like, well, it's not that we're taking the piss out of religion. It's that we're taking a piss out of people who use religion wrong, because this guy uses religion right.
Yeah. Violently, but
That's
like
right.
in a good way. Also, the cult aren't explicitly Christian either. They use a lot of Christian language, and they sort of have strange like crosses, but
it's not a Christian cross. It's a different looking cross. Yeah,
it's a cross made by a game designer. Like, it's
but they do quote
Internet movie cross database being like, these parts on the cross serve no functional purpose.
Also, that like priest guy that you see, this Jerome fellow, he's actually in the opening cutscene where they do like this Netflix Wild Wild Country thing. It's like they treat it like the Rajneeshpuram documentary, where they have like interviews with people and cell phone videos and stuff like that to really get into the rhythm of everything. So it's like, oh, here's this guy you saw before. He's a priest, but no, he's cool and has a gun.
John Seed has basically taken over the area known as Hope's End. Get it? Do you fucking get it? And within Hope's End, everybody who has not been able to physically resist has been forced to join the cult. And Jerome is really the pastor of the one church that's left, the one church that remains a true Christian church that is standing up against this cult. And what John is basically doing is going around, snatching up guys, carving sins into their flesh. And in order to defeat him, you have to team up with a number of other people in the area who are engaged in active resistance. And so you will then get a number of messages from people when you scroll around the map saying, hey, I'm over in the old church and there are bad guys here. Come help me. And you get in a car or whatever your method of transportation is. You go to that place and they will give you a mission. Now,
and I should say, it's all in first person. Whenever you drive or fly a plane, it's always in first person only.
You're driving the special pickup truck that you got because, this being Ubisoft, you bought the like special ultra triple gold premium pre-order edition.
Yes, one might do that. Yes.
Yeah. You have the special like GameStop livery on it because you bought it from GameStop or whatever. And you were secretly quietly sad that you can't get all of the different liveries because you can't buy every different edition at once. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Alice, how did you find the controls of these vehicles? Because we had a spirited debate in the chat about this.
I am like RoboCop here. I have been programmed and trained over like a series of sort of like Far Cry games that I don't even see this anymore. You know, it's just like, this is, I'm operating on a level above being annoyed by it. Is it good? Is it good? Of course not. Is it easy? Of course not. But like at that point, it doesn't even register anymore. You know?
Here's the thing about cars, though, is that At least when you're playing on easy mode, which also easy, what a crock of shit. This game was difficult and made me sad.
Well, it is because all of the enemies have like too much health, and it really
crazy.
suffers from this kind of like late Ubisoft period thing of like every gun is a health bar lowerer.
Yeah, they're all sponges,
and you take maybe 2 hits with like the non-upgraded health, and you're fucking dead. And I played on normal. I couldn't, so I had to lower it down.
When you drive, at least in easy mode, there is an autopilot function where if you like choose your destination, it'll just stay on the road and do the whole thing without you having to touch any buttons. And since this world is so empty and dead, that's what I did. I would just walk away and like get something out of the fridge and come back and then be like, oh, cool, I'm there now.
In the PC version, using WASD is pretty decent as far as controlling the cars go. And if you turn on autopilot, you can press W to go faster.
You can.
And stay
you can
on
do
the
that
autopilot. Okay.
Yeah, you can do that.
Oh,
on console.
and Josh, good news. By you mentioning how the PC version is better than a console version, you've earned us 110 cult points. So keep this up, and we might just have another cutscene.
Yeah. In addition to the missions, you have like little things that you can do. There'll be a little prison transport that will drive by, and you can stop the car and get the guys out of the prison, or you can kill everyone and blow them up, and you don't get penalized at all. But then you'll get little resistance points. It's sort of like Just Cause. How in Just Cause, you're always liberating different areas of the island, but Just Cause does it better. And that's a funny thing to say because it doesn't do it well.
Well, traversal is more fun in Just Cause. I think.
It's just like the sense of like, oh, this area is free now is interesting. Whereas in Far Cry 5, just the further you get up this meter, the more you have these weird scripted encounters, and the more like you'll just have planes show up that start shooting at you at any given time.
Yeah, the plane that kills you instantly.
I do want to mention the cult sort of patrols, because you mentioned those in terms of driving around. Basically, sort of, because they've conscripted everybody in Hope County, the cult, I imagine, has a kind of like universal jobs program where most of the people in the cult are employed sort of driving around back and forth in pickup trucks, I guess looking for you. Or waiting to be ambushed by you. And so when you do liberate an area, when you do sort of like kill a boss or whatever, do those guys go? Do they get replied? No, that's still.
They just stick around.
The
random
There's
planes stop, but like everything else is still just kind of there.
Because just to frame up sort of the objective versus the super objective here, right? Your objectives are all mission based. Either it's going and infiltrating and liberating those cult outposts, or it's doing these story missions, which in my opinion are uniformly terrible, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. Once you complete enough missions, you accumulate these cult points that AJ was mentioning.
You accumulate those regardless of whether you want to. You sneeze on a cult guy, you get like 5 cult points for giving him a cold. And if you look at the top of the screen when they flash up, there are kind of like, it's like a thermometer, right, for like a pledge drive, and there are kind of like marks on the cult pointsometer of how culted you are, and once you hit those, you will get culted whether you like it or not.
That's right.
Well, and sometimes it's like not even the marks, like it's like near the marks where they'll like abduct you.
Sometimes it's over the marks. I got to one case where I was in Faith's area, and I was like, I had fully gotten as many cult points as I could. There were no more missions on the map, and I was like, what's happening? And I could not progress the game until I randomly walked into a field and got so high I activated the game again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so the way that this works, right, is that like roughly sometimes around the progression of the big cultometer mark, that boss, whoever they are, instantly kind of like knocks you unconscious and gets way too close to your face and does the like, you like playing Castlevania, don't you, thing.
And in the case of John, he basically just drags you around to places.
He has the like capture you instantly dart gun that he
every time he captures you, someone comes to rescue you, and then you do a shootout.
Right.
Closer and closer to John's bunker.
The most kidnapped non-binary person in Montana.
Until, of course, you get to basically the penultimate moment where John not only captures you, he captures everybody else. This, of course, all happens off screen.
Everybody you've just been working to liberate this whole time gets captured.
Including Pastor Jerome. You all wake up in Pastor Jerome's church, which now John Seed has basically desecrated, and he is making everybody atone for their sins, right? And by atone for their sins, I mean that he carves the sin into you, which he does to you, the player character, and then to one other guy he
The sin there is gamer.
Yes, yes. And then he rips the skin, like the whole spot where the sin is carved in on one person, which I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool.
That's a fun idea.
There is a giant Hollywood sign in the mountains of John's region that says, yes. Can you hear me, Clem Fandango? Yes. And in this scene, right, in this final scene, you have to say yes to him. Yeah. Right?
Of course, it was originally part of a sort of property development called Say Yes Land. That didn't sell very well. So,
well, here's the thing: had they just held out for a couple more years, they could have had Mickey Mouse as their mascot.
This giant Mickey Mouse statue.
This game, for the first time and secretly for the second time, if you count the prologue, is giving you something that looks like it's going to be a choice, but it's just not. Right. You just have to press the only button that there is to press to say yes to him. But then, surprise, the book that you're going to like swear your fealty on has a gun in it, and somehow you knew that?
Well, because the pastor gives it to you.
Yeah, he like sort of
Jerome Jeffries gives you a little wink.
He gives you the wink that like, this is my gun Bible.
Yeah.
Which shall be given up for you.
I will say too, there was something about how like
I'm not American. Is this common in American churches to have the gun
Usually
Bible?
there's like whiskey in there. It's like there's a flask in there. I know
so
that.
Speaking from the Southern Baptist tradition, there's no whiskey, of course. We're very dry. That's a Catholic thing. And it's not in the Bibles, it's in the hymnals.
Gun hymnal.
Because those are in the pews, and there's one for every member of the congregation.
The thing about the gun Bible, though, right, and Pastor Jerome, is that you can choose to either grab the gun out of the gun Bible right away, which is like pressing F to yes, or you can you can just wait, and then you get to watch John C. just like pistol whipping Pastor Jerome. This was a moment where I was like, okay. You have this white cult leader pistol whipping a black pastor in a way.
Not explicitly a racist cult, though.
No, it's a very diverse cult.
Very diverse.
They're too afraid to even do that. They're not even.
But that's what's so fucking weird.
It's
like you could make it be something, right? But it's not anything. And so it actually makes you feel very uneasy because it's like, what are we doing here?
Trying to spare the feelings of racists. Because the thing that Wolfenstein correctly calculated was like enough people are offended by Nazis that we can take the chance of offending Nazis and not care. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Wolfenstein made a really, really specific aesthetic choice of playing off of like exploitation and blaxploitation movies from the 60s and 70s in making, especially like Wolfenstein 2 is really leaning into that stuff. Yeah. But this game was just being made, right? And then a bunch of stuff happened. And so they were able to market it on that. But they had no intention from the beginning of ever making something that was making a comment about the far right, because they started development on it in like 2013 and it was the Obama years and everybody was happy.
Yes. And sort of the general process of how you write a video game in one of these franchises and what the process of writing that is like gets you to the ending. And we'll talk about that, or I'll talk about that when we talk about the ending, because these are not written the way that you sort of might imagine a video game might be written, where you sit down and do like a sort of holistic work. It's very much like Far Cry project.
Yeah,
right?
Plug it in.
What we can talk about the ending though of is this particular section, right, with John Seed, where you take to the skies in an airplane, you shoot down John's plane.
Again, it's like not to sort of, okay, so part of the setting confection here is like nobody can get in or out of like this entire county of Montana. Nobody has noticed besides the feds who have sent one guy. But there's two things I know about the United States, right? Firstly, it has a lot of guns, right? And often in hymnals. Second of all, it has an air force. I'm pretty certain they have Air Force bases in Montana as well.
Yeah,
they sure do.
Yes,
and you've just got random guys just flying crop dusters around shooting at each other with automatic weapons. And
it's very silly.
Notices.
Just a little, I mean, you've got the fucking Air Force Academy just a couple states south in Colorado. There's no possible way that they would be able to get away with this and that U.S. air support would not do something about it. It's nonsense.
Hey, but at least it's fun flying the planes in first person. At least.
Are you enjoying this sort of like locked War Thunder first person mode? I mean, the thing is, right? Again, this is the thing. This is the place where it almost does something, right? Where it's like you could have done something with the idea of like an entire county of Montana has gone missing, and the federal government's response is one guy, in a way that says, oh, so the federal government has like really like fractured quite badly, like shit has declined horribly, and do some kind of like clever storytelling about that. It'd be very easy to do, but they don't bother. Like, at no point does it occur to anyone.
No, instead they try to make a comment about government overreach in the overall story, as though this is Ruby Ridge, a story where famously there was too much federal involvement, perhaps, you know, or Waco, where they fucking burned that whole place down.
This is a very, very different situation, because you have this cult that is in complete control now of the means of production and most of the local sort of facilities, and is enslaving people against their will, and has apparently managed to develop a large enough economy that they can now start exporting the cult to other areas,
potentially all over the world, including the Netherlands and Kashmir.
I don't know, man. All I know is that once you shoot down John's plane, you're able to kill him, defeat him. Then you take the key off his body, you go back to his bunker, you free Deputy Hudson. Remember her? No, of course you don't.
Absolutely. And also, like, the boss fight is not the last thing. You always have to go back to this person's bunker, and probably the hardest bunker out of the bunch is John's bunker.
Yes.
And you start out, you have your NPC support team with you on the ground, but they don't follow you inside for no reason.
Right.
So it becomes incredibly
that's just
hard.
Corridor shooter, because there's no open worldness to it. It's just like you have to go inside this prepper bunker. All of the prepper bunkers are identical. If you've seen one sort of pallet of filtered water, you've seen them all. If you were not sensible enough to bring a shotgun for this, then you are going to have to be extremely twitchy the whole time.
They have silos in these prepper bunkers, and so my whole thing was like, okay, so this is what you were talking about, Josh. This was the nuclear facilities, right? The abandoned nuclear facilities in Montana. No,
it's just like regular. Could be a fucking grain silo for all anyone knows. Like,
because there's never a threat of launching nukes from Hope's from Hope County, which is very weird to me, because that's what I thought the whole thing was.
That's where our nukes are.
Montana. I thought that they stole the nukes, and that's why the government wasn't like sending in the Air Force.
You wanted something like Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where they like have a nuke religion and they worship the nuke, and then they send it off.
It makes sense if the seeds have a nuclear deterrent. That considerably changes the calculus here.
I would argue it's the only way the ending of this game makes any sense whatsoever.
But instead, these bunkers are just full of Ronald Reagan's strategic jelly bean reserve.
Right.
And also Ronald Reagan.
We got to store all the jelly beans, Mommy. We got to put all of them somewhere in Montana or Wyoming. I get the two of them confused.
Well, Brian, you mentioning the strategic jelly bean reserve has reminded me that I really need to go eat some Jelly Bellies real quick. So I think I'm going to do that. And when we get back, we're going to keep talking about this game, its bizarre storyline, and meet some more guys. So stay tuned for that.
Well, howdy, listeners. Melvin Abercrombie here of the Hope County Abercrombies and recent project at Eden's Gate devotee. Listeners, do you feel like there's something weird in the air? Like the world's once immaculate vibes have gone all switchy-swatchy? Do you have a rumbling in your tum-tum that at any moment the world might go kablooey? Well, congratulations, you're right. So why not spend your remaining days before the skies catch fire running over civilians in Montana and join the Project at Eden's Gate today. The Project at Eden's Gate is everything you could ever want for facing down the imminent collapse of society. We have silos. So join the Project at Eden's Gate today and gaze in wonder and majesty at our seemingly endless supply of guns, ammunition, and attack helicopters, and help us convert the entire world to accept the eternal bliss of... You know, come to think of it, why do we have so many attack helicopters? It seems like every time one of those heretics blows one of ours up, there's always another one just kind of flopping around. I went to ask Joseph about this, but he just took off his shirt and got very close to my face and told me that God is the meat tenderizer and we are the meatballs, and normally that would be enough to satisfy my questions. But then I remembered that Steve, that's my buddy Steve, I saw him get mauled by a bear 2 weeks back, and this morning I saw him walking around without a scratch on him, so I had some questions. So what I did was I went over to one of our silos, you know, the one where everybody likes to hang out and scream, and I decided to sneak down through the door, but we were told we weren't supposed to go, and inside, well, it was a giant man. Only he weren't like any man I'd ever seen, what with a face and a mustache. Oh no, this man had no arms, legs, or neck, and his hair spun like some sort of hair jubilee. As his eyes pulsated with blood, his gloved hands gripping 2 metal rings for support as he hung suspended over a great pit. But the strange part was, every few minutes he would make this guttural moan that sounded vaguely like woo, and out from a previously unseen birth canal would drop a new item. Sometimes an attack helicopter, sometimes an AK-47 painted like the old Stars and Stripes, always covered in goo, while my fellow brothers of Eden's Gate surrounded this great being and chanted the phrase, Ubisoft, Ubisoft, Ubisoft. Now, I was afeared, dear listener, and I wanted to run, but something kept me rooted to the spot, a great question within me longing to be answered. And just as I had mustered the strength to pry my legs from the floor, the giant man released a particularly painful woo, and out of his purple torso dropped me, Melvin Abercrombie of the Hope County Abercrombies, covered in goo, but decidedly me. But if that was me, then who am I? And how many more of me are there? So come to Hope County, Montana, the only county in America with 400 farms and not a single McDonald's. The project at Eden's Gate. Get pegged!
I was thinking the other day.
Yeah.
What if John Seed got saved?
You know, I bet he'd start singing praise in a whole new way.
I bet he would.
Yeah.
I bet he would.
I don't know what that way would be because he doesn't have any clearly definable tics that we could capitalize on, much like that song did with the cartoon characters.
But it would be something like, I'm gonna put a gun in a Bible, hallelujah. That's a joke. That's a joke that's going to be like entirely understandable to maybe 20% of our listeners.
Yeah. Well, look, we've done away with John Wiggly Goo, right? We've moved on to his sister in faith. Yeah. One might call her Faith Wiggly Goo.
I might call her that. Yeah, let's talk about Faith Seed, the second of the Seed family,
getting
right?
A bit more weed, getting a bit more weird with it. And
we are getting weird with it, and slightly weird with it, because Faith is a young woman who came from a fucked up background, and Joseph, the father, of course, convinced her to join the cult and immediately put her in charge of manufacturing and distributing a drug. This is a special drug that the cult makes called the Bliss. And what this drug does is it basically zombifies you. You get put into sort of a surreal dream state.
Which is also called the Bliss.
Yes.
Yes. The drug and the state it puts you in are both the same thing.
Yes. Right. It's like how you do heroin to enter heroin.
Boy, I got really salvia'd yesterday.
It lasted 14 seconds and I saw a goat that called me Doug.
The net effect of the Bliss is that you are in this surreal dream world called the Bliss. Everything is happy in this world. All of your needs are met, but you can be manipulated to do evil things. Only sometimes, depending. Not clear.
The cult kind of uses this extensively, but only within 1/3 of the map, because we have to have defined things for everybody to do. And listen, everybody's got their own thing. I appreciate Joseph Seed having a kind of like very hands-off management style where he's like, everybody gets a slice of the map and you can do your own weird thing there, and we'll see
sort of
what
like,
works out.
Federalism in the United States. He's basically just, copying a very good model of governance that works very well in our country.
Wouldn't that have been interesting if they commented on it in the game?
Interesting.
That he was running a federalist cult?
But instead, you just have these kind of like bliss plantations and labs and tanks, and it's kind of sort of suggested to be made of scopolamine, which is like a sort of nightshade. Again, I come back to my problem with this game, or one of my problems with this game, which is this could be interesting if you followed through on any single aspect of it.
That's the thing.
It's like ADHD. It's genuinely, it's like, here are a bunch of beginnings of interesting ideas. I get distracted. Here's another interesting idea beginning.
Because you wouldn't have to follow through on all of those ideas. You could keep the other ideas loosely defined and just really define one of them. But the game doesn't fucking do that.
No, Josh, we gotta have a cougar. We gotta have a cougar you can pet. I do like petting.
A fucking cougar.
It's just literally, it's like design document stuff. You write at the top of the thing, and we'll get to this about the writing process again, but you just write at the top of the thing, baby's first writing, themes. What are the themes? What do I want to explore here?
What's very confusing, too, is that Faith has this whole thing where you enter the bliss and you're able to be manipulated to do things you wouldn't normally do, right?
Yeah.
And that's very different from Jacob in the third part, who can also brainwash you.
Yeah, but his way is hotter, though, is the thing.
No, it is. It is.
So Faith's thing is
to you, maybe.
This game is an
100%.
anthology series with 3 episodes, and 2 of them are the same episode.
Basically, Faith,
Except that Faith is interesting, and we'll get to why, but the game does not capitalize on any of that.
Yeah, no. Instead, what happens is, like, where you hit the big cultometer thing and you get culted, under John, he would show up and be like, hey, you should get some stuff carved on you.
Yeah.
Faith will show up in her kind of like, how would we describe her aesthetic? I don't even know how to be rude about it.
I was thinking like Mormon interior design influencer.
Yeah, it's kind of like busted drug Mormon trad wife shit. And she'll show up and she'll kind of like wave her trad dress at you and be like, you want to get manipulated so bad. You want to be on drugs so bad. And your non-binary self is like, yes.
How is this not hotter than Jacob's thing?
We'll get to it when we talk about Jacob's thing, and I will sort of like bark like a dog.
Hypno.
That's why
on what your thing is.
Yeah, this is why the sissy hypno stuff sort of like alienates me. It's like, I find that very foreign from my experience. But Jacob's stuff, a lot of commonalities there.
Yeah.
How would you like to walk the slowest you've ever walked in your life? What if you want to take like 5 minutes to go like maybe 20 feet?
Well, that's the
Faith's
funniest
whole
thing is that one of Faith's little interstitial things, you keep meeting up with the Marshal in the hallucination universe, and there's a point where you have to stop the Marshal from going through a gate by just walking up to him very, very slowly. As
And then
he
don't you press,
also
it's like
walks slowly, and you press
F
square
to not have him go through.
Yeah,
gate.
it's sort of like that part in Death Stranding where you have to stop the Death Stranding from going into the ocean. And you have to grab her hand or whatever. But like it was a cutscene, so I stopped paying attention and I was looking at my phone, and it took me, just a couple of seconds to be like, oh, it's playable now. And I started walking, and I was right behind him as he went through the gate, because I spent like a minute just walking very slowly to catch up to him, and then it was like, no, you failed the mission. And I'm like, what mission? This is an interactive cutscene. Why is there a fail state?
I will say, you mentioned Death Stranding. I would say that Faith's vibes are not dissimilar from Amelie in Death Stranding. Both in terms of appearance and overall kind of like demeanor, I guess.
So you mean like this, the creator of this game, just like how Kojima like got really horny watching The Bionic Woman 50 years ago, he was like imprinting on some like hippie chick that he saw.
I think so. It definitely feels specific in a way.
Yeah, but it feels gross to be horny about her because of all the stuff you learn during her boss fight while you're shooting her in the head.
Yeah. You're like shooting her a bunch because she's got a massive health bar, and she's like, I have trauma. I'm neurodivergent.
and a minor.
Also, they realized how annoying it was because there are checkpoints in the middle of it. You get checkpoints at different spots on the health bar.
So they did playtest this.
Yeah, once.
When we start the Faith area, you come across a prison. And this is basically the resistance outpost, right? Big base operations here for a group called the Cougars. The Cougars are a local resistance unit.
Led by your sheriff, the guy who you were with at the beginning.
And Faith has successfully zombified one of your companions who you were with in the helicopter at the beginning of the game, Marshall Burke. Eventually, she actually brain controls him. She sissy hypnos him into killing one of the Cougars.
Yeah.
A man known as Virgil.
Virgil Minkler.
She Virgil on my Minkler.
Come on.
I don't know. Listen.
Till I cry. Far.
Yeah, so somebody glanced at the back cover of Dante's Inferno and was like, "Oh, that has to do with religion."
Probably. Yeah.
Name of this guy, Virgil.
So you go and you have to do some missions for Virgil Menaker, and
Come on. I had the same thought, actually.
that's what I thought. That's what his name was.
It's
at
a
first.
Virgil Menaker? That can't be right.
They use this drug, the Bliss, all over the place. You'll see containers of it. You'll see silos of it on any part of the map. And so it's like, oh yeah, they're poisoning the water supply. They're doing whatever. But here it's
making
like
the freaking frogs gay, etc.
And here it's like cranked up. So they also poison animals, and then the animals are something called judges, which like no one ever says, but like certain descriptions say judges. And so it's like eventually you get a sense that, oh, that means those animals. Okay. What Faith has been doing has been making zombies, and there's just straight up zombies who take more bullets to take down because of how high they are.
Sponges.
Yeah.
I mean,
And they also are constantly farting because they just have a green fart cloud around them at all times. It looks so silly. And there's giant like churches in Faith's area that you get to take out as well, right? And they're also like radiating this green
shrines,
gas. And it looks so dumb. Like it looks like PlayStation 2 levels of like smoke effects in a game that generally looks fine.
Yeah, the visual effects when you are high are really interesting and very specific.
the chromatic aberration.
Yeah,
and
it kind
stuff
of looks
they
like
do.
you're looking through a prism, and
I mean, I generally find anything where they drug you, where the game drugs you, to be profoundly annoying, and there's absolutely no exception where it just puts the kind of like green wash over everything, or have enemies that, as you say, are kind of like farting scopolamine at you, and I just kind of, to me, this is the weakest bit of the game, like as far as like the regions of it go, like even more so than the guy who built the sort of Hollywood land.
It feels right. Yeah, it feels like in this area too, you're having to try to work to get your cult points. Like in other regions, in Jacob's region, it happens like way too fast. You're just like blazing through it. In John's region, it all kind of happens normally, but in like the Southeast, you're scouring areas to find things to do in order to get your cult points up.
And you meet the recurring character from previous Far Cry games, Alice. I think maybe you would know more about him than I, but he just has a rocket launcher and his dad's running for senator, I guess.
Oh God,
his mom has a helicopter too.
Oh, we should talk about Herc.
Yeah, Herc.
We gotta. He puts the Glad in Gladiator.
Yeah, so this is a recurring character all the way from like Far Cry 3 with some DLC, and the role here is to be epic.
He's so
and
epic.
Whenever they need an epic guy to show up, or in the co-op, they just dump this guy on you. And so his dad is in this as a never Trump anti-cult small business tyrant Republican.
Yeah, where they've kind of squared this away is that which, like, this is funny to me. I liked some of the writing here. They all think of the cult as hippies and like Canadian liberals. What's even funnier about it is that the right-wing guys who are now like, yeah, this is a based and red-pilled Far Cry game, unlike Far Cry 6, made by like the same people, but they're woke now. They have taken that to be gospel. Like, they believe that what the good NPCs are saying is correct. and the cult members are communists. Again, these are the right-wingers who aren't the ones saying that the cult is right, actually. And then they'll get into arguments with each other online. It's very fun.
We haven't mentioned it yet, but the culties have a name because they are Eden's Gate, right? Like that is the name.
Project at Eden's Gate.
But for short, everyone calls them Peggies.
Yes.
Which I
Peggy
think
18.
it's so interesting hearing all of the supposedly good NPCs at some point just saying, these globalists are coming for me.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait,
and they believe that, the cult is part of the globalist NWO agenda. And like, it's like there's almost something there. They're trying to do the Rockstar thing again, and it's somehow even more incoherent than the Rockstar thing.
Yeah.
Because Rockstar at least has like solid writers, so they're able to like at least just complete the joke in some way.
I mean, speaking of NPCs in this game, right? We have Herc, obviously the epic one who shoots rocket launchers and is generally, at least he has a personality.
Yeah, and he's
so
a liberal.
Sure.
And since he's been out of the country for a while, he's never heard of Donald Trump. He just refers to the president as that orange Russian guy.
He also won't assume your gender.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true,
There's a line where he's like, I don't assume anybody's gender.
Where everybody else assumes that you're non-binary.
Fake Nepal. Yeah, exactly. He's like more woke in that way. He went to fake Nepal to find himself, you know?
So I wanted to ask you guys about this statue because I didn't really get to experience much of it, and I wondered if I missed something. So Faith has these like 13 steps to enlightenment. Those have like shrines on this path that lead up to the statue, and then people will like climb up the statue, get out onto the book that the statue is holding, and jump off, which I did see someone do. So when I came to the southeast part of the map, I just was in a helicopter with guns, and the moment I flew past the statue, they were like, that thing's hollow, you can shoot it. So I shot it and I destroyed it immediately.
Same. Yeah.
Same.
Oh, okay. So whatever story there was or whatever thing you could do inside the statue was completely closed off to me because I had already just
there's a
destroyed
story
it.
mission to destroy it that you have just sort of sequence broken there. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you shoot it. Well, what happened with me was I shot the statue, I destroyed it, and then I had to get out of the plane and climb up it.
Right.
Right,
You
you
had
had
to
to something at the very
the story.
But I
mission.
just sort of jumped out at the top and grabbed the book or whatever.
Oh, that makes so much more fucking sense.
going from up to down. Yeah.
Oh my god!
you're already above
I fought through that whole thing so many times and died so many times.
I missed nothing. Great.
I could have just jumped off at the top. I'm so bad at video.
One of the NPCs that jumped out at me in this part was a man known as Sharky.
Who's Sharky?
Sharky's got a flamethrower, and he loves setting the quote-unquote angels, which are the guys who have been poisoned by the bliss. He loves setting them on fire.
Yeah, he's the guy you meet halfway through the zombie movie who's just like doing his own thing and surviving just fine.
The thing is, like, these angels, as they call them, the game in its writing is very clear that like they're past the point of no return, that there's no way to rehabilitate them or whatever.
Yeah.
But, there's something really interesting about a plot that has you gunning down drug addicts in the state of Montana.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just didn't sit well with me.
Putting Josh on the wall, another lib triggered. Mission accomplished.
Pretty much.
I was interested in, again, it's like the beginnings of ideas, right? This idea that this woman is being like exploited and being kind of like groomed and manipulated by the cult to sort of like manipulate people in their turn. And it like hints at those things.
Yeah.
It's like, because it knows what it expects from you, which is to be a sort of a gun and a crosshair. And if you go that extra step further and like poke around, it will reward you with like, here's a little bit of flavor text or something. That's as much as we expect you to do. Right. Anything beyond that, any sort of like coherent thing, don't even worry about it. You've misapprehended what you're supposed to do here.
One of the biggest missed opportunities of this game is not having the ability to spare Faith at the end of the boss battle, because here's the thing, spoilers for the end of the game, your whole mission is to arrest Joseph Seed, right?
Yeah.
It is not to kill him.
Right.
But you kill all of his lieutenants along the way. The people who he manipulated.
And just normal people.
And
just lots of
just
guys.
normal folks. Just so many people. The entire population of Butte. But in this one in particular, Faith, during the boss battle, she all of a sudden, after all these years of trauma and completely buying into the cult thing, is like, oh, wait, no, I have complete clarity about everything that happened to me. And I'm going to tell you about it all right now, where I think a much more interesting game would have had you go through Oliver County and discovered people who knew her before the cult.
Right.
And like, she wasn't always this way. Joseph turned her, and maybe she can be turned back. And maybe the guy she kills can be like, please don't kill her. This is not her fault, even as he lays dying. And so you would have more of an, like, you know, a motivation to keep her alive. But it's like finding out her past from her in that moment feels like so little, so late. It's like you watched an action movie, and at the end, like the villain has a Shakespearean monologue about, by the way, I'm actually an interesting character.
It's the same with the sort of like the formula, right? The same with the resist ending or whatever, or the sort of the not ending, where you just walk away, where it's like at the last second you do the thing that the game makes you do, and it's like, well, don't you feel bad now? Well, why would
wagging its finger at you through the
I do feel bad now. I'm down $60
or more potentially.
You bought the pickup truck.
So many microtransactions.
But you know what? I got a red, white, and blue AK-47, and it looks shiny.
Faith's whole story, her presentation, her performance is that of a true believer. Whereas with the other two deputies, or whatever we call them, the other two guys, the other two bosses, Jacob and John, they're like not true believers. There's no sense of that like weird pious energy that, you know, I'm not talking about realism here. I'm talking about just like fun. What's a fun thing to do? Offer counterpoints in your performance, right? Joseph is interesting in that regard, vaguely, and Faith is interesting like that, but John and Jacob are just like mean guys who are mean to you.
One was in the military.
It's true. He makes it his entire personality. He's a fat bro, which is again interesting.
Yeah, but I feel like this is a problem with AAA.
Black Rifle Coffee Company ass motherfucker. I have the most to say about Jacob by far.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a sec, but I think I just wanted to say too, this seems like a problem with AAA in general. That like you have, we talked about this in our Modern Warfare 2 episode, right? The guy at the end of that game who rolls around in the tank and yells at you.
Everyone wants to do Spec Ops, but they don't know how to do Spec Ops, right? Like they don't know, they don't understand. They never even just copy the things that are really great about that stuff. Because Spec Ops even still knows how to use like counterpoint. Instead of just saying you are bad, it in fact says you're still a good person, right? Aren't you a good person, right?
Right.
And that's what it leans into, which is just inherently more interesting than you're doing a bad thing right now. Hey, it's bad. Like saying those explicit words.
Here's a choice line of dialogue from the guy you have to get the alien gun from. Are you ready?
Yeah.
How's that for raising the stakes?
Wow,
that was written just for
you.
That was
gotta
just
go
for
to, like,
you,
writing
AJ.
school for that, you know.
Yeah, I know. And here's another one. Have I spoken enough cliches to get you on board? Good.
Oh, that fourth wall is quaking right now.
That was in the game. They left that in the game. That's placeholder dialogue.
Maybe the thing that annoys me the most is whenever video games get a sense of self-awareness about that, and so in the like 50th out of 100 side quests where you have to pick up 3 items scattered across the map, at least they don't have a voiced protagonist, thank God. So you don't have a protagonist to be like, oh, why do I have to go? Let me guess, I have to go and collect 3 items, and then you still have to go and collect the 3 fucking items.
Just to sort of wrap up Faith's arc here real quick, as we were saying, you shoot
her so many times for being a victim of domestic violence.
She has the least annoying bunker out of the bunch because you're still hallucinating, so it's still full of plants for half of it. And then you still have to shoot a bunch of guys in a corridor.
I love when I'm high and then I just stop being high instantly in the middle of a hallway or something.
Yeah,
I also love this.
My vision gets the like sort of color back to normal, and I'm just like, cool.
And then you got to turn big wheels, and you have to turn them the slowest you've ever turned a wheel in your life. And hope to God some guy doesn't spawn behind you and stab you in the spinal cord.
But yes, you do succeed ultimately in defeating Faith, but unfortunately, your companion Marshall Burke did kill Virgil Menaker, and then himself in a boss battle.
It got too much for him. It got too weird.
Yeah.
You know?
The end. Faith is dead. So let's go to Act 3. This is Jacob.
I'm cracking every knuckle in my body.
Jacob is a war vet. He served in the First Gulf War in the Airborne. He is basically a Nazi.
Can I just disrespect the troops for a minute? Right.
Please.
That's too bitch made of a war to come back with like this level of shit from.
Yes.
Because he's fulfilling the like role here of Vietnam veteran or whatever. Right. But he's doing it about having been in, I guess, like Desert Shield.
That's the thing is like the First Gulf War is a genesis point for a lot of modern right-wing grievance, especially when you're talking about the militia movement.
Yeah, Osama bin Laden's grievance, most notably.
Yeah, and Timothy McVeigh and the anthrax vaccine that everyone got that was like really weird. I mean, that's what the whole Tracy Letts play and movie Bug is all about, is about a Gulf War veteran and about the weird fucked up shit that went on in there. And so they're trying to draw to that because we don't have interesting cult stuff outside of Cliven Bundy, who's not that interesting. Since the 90s, since the ATF stuff, and since David Koresh and everything, it kind of low key fell off TBH.
This is the kind of the militia end of the sort of cult militia spectrum, where Faith is like 100% cult. Jacob is like sort of much closer to sort of paranoid, violent veteran sort of militias. And because that's verging on the political, that means that they have to include a good militia. Yeah. so that you can know that militias aren't always a bad thing.
Yeah. Right. It's the White Tail Militia, led by a man known as Eli Palmer.
This is Threepers versus Proud Boys now. Or like Boogaloos versus aggressive Christianity. Or like any number of things that has actually happened in the state of New Mexico in the last 20 years.
I mean, militias spend a lot of their time fucking beefing with other militias over
they love
nothing.
That
so
shit.
This is realistic in that sense.
Yeah. What we learn about Jacob from our encounters with him is that he, as a result of his war experience, has basically become a Nazi. Now, they do not make this explicit. They do not have any sort of like Nazi or Nazi adjacent imagery or anything explicitly
the side
fascist.
shave, and he just talks about like Evo Psych stuff.
Right. So
he
like
also
he clearly
eats people or something. Did I misunderstand? There was that whole thing with the cook who like eats people.
Oh no, that was one of his guys. That was ridiculous.
That's one of his weird guys.
That's a guy who has no story or dialogue or anything. You're just sort of told about him and then you kill him from a distance.
That was so funny. That was a moment that was just way too much. That one of the first sort of story things that you do is you meet up with this girl who then can be one of your recruitable NPCs who you can have shoot for you. And she's like, and there was this guy known as the cook. And you know why they called him the cook? Well, because he had a family and there were children and he made the children eat the parents and then he killed the parents. And I was like, this is too much. This is just too much.
So he's not feeding people to his militia then. He's not grabbing whitetails and cooking them. That's what I thought.
No, I think only the cook was doing that. That's why they call him the cook.
That's very hands off, you know.
Also, the whole county is covered in like set pieces from NBC's Hannibal. They really liked Hannibal, and you know, it's a solid show, some very great visuals. And so they just decided to do exactly that all over. They're like, isn't this crazy and fucked up? Look at all these people.
Because Jacob is like the like extra sadistic one, or sort of like a brutally sadistic one.
Yeah, if you've played Myst, he's Aknar from Myst, right? That's kind of his deal. He's just a very sick and twisted and fucked up guy.
If Faith is doing sissy hypno, he's doing, I guess, like mask hypno. Once again, he has the like capture you instantly dart gun, right? And when he captures you instantly, he's like, I'm going to do some like basic Evo Psych. Have you heard of Jordan Peterson? He's got some good ideas. Right. He's like an actual psychologist or something.
Suck on that, Joseph Seed.
And then he will like kind of torture you in quite a horny way where he like puts you in a dog cage or whatever. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like hypnotize you and like it implants suggestions in you that make you better at killing.
Yeah, have a gander at my magical music box.
Yeah, so the dog meat that he's feeding you, that's not humans?
I don't think so. I think it's.
I think that's just
I thought it was human the whole time.
Yeah, I think he's just like locking you in a cage and like feeding you dog food, which I've had Saturday nights like this. It's fine.
He's doing the third act of Audition to you, and and then he's also playing a song that then makes you go and play this brainwashing session 4 fucking times. The exact same mini game.
I quite liked this. I thought this was the beginning of an interesting idea.
I thought it was
I almost liked it. And then the third time came around and it was exactly the same. And I said, this is a bit much.
I hate timers.
And then the fourth time came around and I threw my mouse out the window.
Because again, it's trying to drive a little choice thing. And again, you could just do nothing, but then you just fail the mission over and over and over again.
Forced failure.
You have the choice if you want it to be about choice, you
but like
prick.
on the other hand, submit yourself to the gameplay. You know, do as you're told, get better at it, start enjoying it is I think the idea.
Yeah.
And then you go, you got me. You mask hypnoed me after all. Because now I started like doing like runs on this thing to try and get better at it, and you have hypnotized me, sir.
And that's where we differ. I never want to be good at a game, so I just
Alice, I'm on board with you kind of in that there is like a middle ground I think between these two, where I think the first 3 times I'm going through it and it adds a little more. Like you have to keep going into the section, you have to keep going into the bunker. It presents this thing as a plot twist that you end up killing the head of the white tail
Eli.
militia.
Yeah. Whoa, he's been training
killing
you to like infiltrate your own base and shoot your way in and kill this guy.
If you wanted this to be a surprise, don't make it look exactly like the bunker that you're in.
Right.
Every time.
the whole time you're doing it, it's like, I bet he's brainwashing me to kill somebody, and then you do it. The only surprise to me was that I wasn't killing everybody. I was only killing one person when I did this.
What were you doing in the first part where you're shooting at nothing? Like why even have that except to be a gallery shooter?
Here's what I will say. The other NPCs, after you kill Eli thanks to brainwashing, the other NPCs are surprisingly forgiving.
Yeah, they're like, it's okay, you were brainwashed.
They threaten to torture you with a paddling pool, which... Okay.
It's like,
we
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get what I'm coming from.
We know you didn't mean it. Just please leave now. But like, and earlier too, there's like a mission where you go and rescue other people who are being brainwashed, and like, they're brainwashing people, like what they've been trying to do to you. So it's like everyone knows. It's not just that you know. Everybody knows that you're being brainwashed to kill somebody, and they just let it happen.
The little music box thing is so stupid.
Yeah.
Like it's supposed to be like threatening or spooky or whatever, but it's like this
music boxes are scary, Josh. They freak me out.
This one song that he has on the music box.
Yes.
When you hear that song, it's going to act as a like hypnotic trigger, and it's going to make you pop off gamer style and like execute everyone around you.
Yeah.
And that song is Only You.
Yeah.
The NPCs in that moment take on the morality of the game in general when it comes to killing civilians, which is like, you better not. We're not going to do anything about it, but don't. Please don't. And you're like,
don't stop.
If there's no consequences, I'm running people down because everyone looks exactly the fucking same. I don't know who's holding who hostage. They all have
I have killed so many good guys in this game because I was just like, there's a person in front of me now, better shoot him.
Yep.
Which a solid game could actually run on that idea.
I love that every time you kill a civvy, it says, warning, do not kill innocent civilians, and it does nothing.
Please
Again,
don't.
law enforcement movements. You are a sheriff's deputy.
It's very distracting that your protagonist keeps having to turn off their body cam before every single mission.
Imagine going through the body cam footage of the shooting of, like, at this point, conservatively 1,000 people.
Right.
Where did they get a bow and arrow?
You just threw a shovel at a guy's head. Like, what the fuck? Is that even in the use of force policy? Hope County Sheriff's Office is gonna be under like a Department of Justice supervision after this.
At least for 2 weeks. And then
the Department of Justice came in. They said we're not allowed to throw shovels at people anymore.
Or shoot shovels at people. The gun that shoots shovels. I liked that. That was fun.
That was fun.
Yes.
Like, this is the thing of like taking your weirdness and like dialing up things that are actually fun. But the problem is it throws everything at the wall, and so much of it misses. And because they're like afraid to take anything back out, which is weird for a game that's like so barren and so repetitive. You just end up with like 50 different ways of doing the same 3 things.
Oh man, and like when it comes down to
one
it,
or 2 of those are funny.
When it comes down to it, like you can buy all these weapons from the little in-game store and customize them and everything. And then if you like accidentally equip a weapon that replaces the one that you bought, you can go back to the store and just pick it up again. But you have to wade through the whole menu in between weapons that you haven't bought and weapons that you have.
Right.
And it doesn't show the gun with the modifications that you've added to it either. So it's like, it's a real pain to just like manage your own inventory when you don't have that much inventory to deal with.
Yeah, and it's also this thing where you can solve more or less the entire game with one thing that works for you and never rely on anything else. Like you can either call in the attack helicopters and have them do it for you, or the thing that I always do with this is like if you get like a semi-automatic rifle with a suppressor and like a nice optic on it, you can just sit in a bush outside of the outpost, shoot everybody in the head, and then as the last guy comes up and goes, hey, all of my friends have been shot in the head, he walks into your sight line, you shoot him in the head too, and you get you are a perfect stealth ninja thing.
I went back and replayed a little bit of the original Far Cry just because I was like, wait, I thought I enjoyed Far Cry. And went back and replayed the original. And look, is it a great game? No, I wouldn't say so. But I would say that the actual like mechanics of it feel better than this game.
Well, the thing about Far Cry 2 specifically is that it lands something because it has a degree of intentionality about it that this game tries a few times with the like punishing you for like doing it as designed, where the game is like, no, you are a dick for even thinking about playing me, and as a consequence I'm going to like punish you for doing it. That's great. I had a fantastic time with it because that means that there are kind of like no failures, you know, like there are no failures of gameplay design because you can go, oh, this is irritating, and then sort of gaslight yourself into going, well, wait a second, is it supposed to be? And the answer is, well, kind of. And this doesn't sort of have the courage of its convictions enough to pull that off. You know, it's not willing to gaslight you enough.
Can I talk about an aspect of this game that I actually had a lot of fun with, which I think a lot of people didn't?
Oh,
but
sure.
it like really fucking worked for me. The Clutch Nixon missions.
Oh, I didn't play any of
I
these.
can't stand those things.
And that's, I was genuinely surprised to go online and like find out that people didn't like them. But I found them incredibly endearingly done.
Okay.
In a way that like I feel like most of this game takes itself so fucking seriously that like the Clutch Nixon, first of all, this guy, to set up who he is a stuntman who you can find various missions around the map where you basically recreate his stunt courses using various vehicles or your wingsuit.
He's like an Evel Knievel kind of guy, right?
Yeah, he's an Evel Knievel. Yeah. He has a theme song which fucking rocks.
Yeah. Like this is the thing. Like this game, you can hear the gear change between like normal sort of like cult bullshit and we're trying to be wacky and fun. And this time it lands.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a specific line in the game that like my favorite line in the game, which is like Clutch Nixon versus Ennui. Right?
Yeah.
Where Clutch Nixon like defeats his fear of death and acquires like existential meaning via driving a muscle car over a gorge, and it's like that's genuinely really funny.
I don't know, it's like this 80s sort of bro culture, right?
Well, the same thing they leaned into in Blood Dragon. Like Blood Dragon was all that.
Apparently Far Cry just needs to be about the 80s. Like
basically.
Basically. Well, I mean,
that's part of why
spoilers, that's what they're making this into, right?
That's also part of why OG Far Cry works as well as it does. It's not set in the 80s, but it feels like an 80s B movie.
Oh yeah.
Like it feels like Rambo or something. Like that's the feel of it, and the voice acting is intentionally very, very campy. There's really no feeling weirder in this game than the end of Jacob's arc, I think. You get through all the stuff. Again, you've completed your cult points. You've gone through the necessary red rooms, and now you have to hunt down and kill Jacob. Yeah. Right?
And he lets you know that he killed his baby.
Ooh, yeah. It's like, here's my trauma.
But didn't eat it, I guess?
Who cares?
What are they eating? Where are they getting their food if not from fellow man?
The 9,000 bison.
Yeah.
All of the like prepper jelly beans.
But yeah,
all of the fish, like the thing that I liked, like the thing that I sunk way too much time
the fishing
into,
minigame?
the like arcade fishing minigame,
Yeah.
which I had a
is pretty
great
fun.
time, and
Yeah.
it's again weirdly complete and allows you,
Yeah.
and this is going to get into some of my complaints about the fucking ending, allows you to sink like a lot of time into this and be like, oh, I know what a rainbow trout is, and I have like opinions about them now.
Well, I hate to keep talking about the stuff that isn't fun, but it is the meat and potatoes of the game, and so we have to talk about the ending with Jacob, right?
Yeah.
Where you get out of his bunker, and there are all of these, like, you're still sort of in a semi-high state of some sort. And
Yeah, you're in
everything,
Hulk mode.
Yeah, you're in Hulk
yeah.
mode. Everything's glowing red. You have to blow up 6 MacGuffins. And then what you have to do is go to the top of a mountain and kill Jacob.
Curiously, like intimate and homoerotic, by
Yeah.
the way. Which again
yeah.
is interesting. Is something like so. Far Cry 3 had a like evil, sadistic gay boss.
Yeah.
Right. And it was very homophobic. It was very poorly done. But I feel positively about when my community is represented evilly, right? Because in some ways it's like it's better than nothing. And when the actors really lean into it, even with a dog shit script, you can be like, yeah, fuck yeah, be evil.
Yeah.
You know, be a serial killer, go on with your bad self. And so this guy, slay, exactly. And so this guy being like, I have mask hypnoed you into being my weapon. Please now gut me with a hunting knife. Is like really there's something to it.
Yeah, it's
to me,
very
you know,
it's very
gets
Snake
me
and
going.
Ocelot kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where like
Very
you
muscly,
must
very-
defeat me,
yeah.
you must take my power, you must eat me.
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to eat him, even though they wouldn't let me.
You really wanted someone to eat someone, Brian.
Are we doing like a liberatory queer reading of Far Cry 5?
I didn't have lunch, and
I'm so hungry.
to serve man.
yeah, and my next shipment of Guy isn't coming in for another day.
What do you think Huel is? You know?
Now with all 3 of the lesser seeds out of the way,
don't
it
like
is
that.
once again back
Yeah, you've done
to
the bad seeds, now Nick Cave.
That's
you know?
right. That's right. And it is once again back to Joseph's compound where you were at the very beginning of the game when you landed the chopper.
Because surprise,
at
it's
his
actually just
chapel.
in the middle of the map the whole time.
Yeah,
And-
crazy.
On returning to the chapel, you find Joseph. He has suddenly and completely inexplicably sissy hypnoed everybody
Yeah,
in the whole town.
Never should have given those guys the like captures you instantly dark gun technology.
You did.
right?
Yeah,
Also,
which they
just-
refuse to use on you
yeah,
except in
just-
very specific moments.
Just for context, I should say, at this point, you have invested at least $60, possibly a lot more in microtransactions,
Yep.
and
Yes.
dozens of hours minimum.
Yep.
If it grabbed you or you're used to this series, maybe like 100 hours, if not more, into this bullshit. And you're like, all right, I'm ready to, I don't have to have like an open world gameplay after this. I'm ready for it to end.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm ready to see where this story goes. I've had some like interesting moments. some
You've
hits,
done
some
like
misses.
unlimited genocide on the first world cultists here.
That's right.
Like
yes.
no one is left, and yet somehow they have all captured all of the people once more. None of your actions have meant anything, and you walk back up to that same church from the beginning.
That fucking sentence. Yeah. So your guys, your various NPCs are all zombied out, and you have to cure them by shooting them into sort of like unconsciousness and then grabbing them back up by the hand, and that sort of cures them.
Yeah, but what if you learned your lesson? What if you turn around? What if you let it be?
Yeah, what if you leave the cult to their own
because fucking Joseph Seed is like, you could have just never had any of this happen before. He doesn't talk like this. This is just me doing a voice.
I need this from AJ. I need this from AJ real quick.
Okay. Oh boy.
The prodigal son has returned. I see you've brought your little friends. You know who else had friends? Jesus Christ. Now, turn your little booty around and get out of my you little slut.
This is closer to the writing of what Jacob's bit's like.
That's true.
It is.
This is when they're trying to drive home this game, which has offered no critical lens on what you're doing. You just kill people all the time, is now like, you could have just done nothing at the beginning, man. You could have just done nothing.
Crazy. So Joseph will also, like, at the start of his, like, boss battle where you're just shooting him many times, knock over all of these, like, water drums full of bliss, full of drugs, to be like, it's entering trippy mode now. Right, so this is going to be, like, weird now. It's going to be trippy. No, you just shoot him a bunch of times. And you go, well, maybe that's going to affect the ending in some way. And it's, you know, and now that my perception has been kind of altered, maybe that's going to... No, just it may as well have been like a drum full of Fresca. Like, it doesn't.
So if you don't do the boss battle, you just all get in the car. The sheriff says he's going to call the National Guard. You drive away.
You're going to Missoula, and as soon as you turn on the radio, it's like you're listening to like 102.2. It's not your grandma's country music station. They play a bunch of sound effects, and then for some reason they play the fucking music box song.
Yeah.
Very coincidentally,
and then your
at that
vision
moment,
goes red, and it's suddenly credits. The credits are rolling.
you go gamer mode on them. You know, no escape.
The sissy hypno didn't take, but that mask hypno, holy shit!
So in that world, everything is, you know, you killed a bunch of people, and then you killed the cops, and now the cult controls this area. Compared to when you make the choice to do this boss fight and you take down Joseph,
You can say, okay, I'm going to fight you, Joseph Seed. At which point you pull out your gun and you start blasting. And all of the brainwashed friends of yours who you've met over the course of this game, you shoot them as well.
You just have to shoot them so hard that they're not high anymore and they like you again.
I found this boss battle to be actually pretty easy.
Yeah, it's super easy.
Yeah.
The boss battles in general are not quite as difficult as I think just ordinary encounters.
Just driving around.
No, Faith, I would say
so much harder.
Faith's boss battle is the most difficult of the four.
Yeah, and they compensate by just putting checkpoints inside of it.
That ends pretty quickly, right? You've resurrected all of your friends back to full health and they are bliss-free. You are ready to eliminate or cuff or whatever Joseph Seed.
Yeah.
And then the angriest I have ever been at a video game, or I think maybe even a writer, because over the course of the game, there have been a couple of like blink and you'll miss them. And the first time I played this, I did miss them. Like news updates on the radio that would sort of like tie into this, like, oh, things are bad for the federal government. That's why we're, only sending this one guy and so on and so forth. That's like war might be about to break out with North Korea.
See, okay, I missed that. This game has 2 radio stations, like Grand Theft Auto or other games, they'll have a bunch of radio stations. This game was like, we don't need to do that. We'll have 2. One is all cult music all the time, and one is oldies. And you almost always, like, if you just get into a car, it's going to have either no radio on or the cult radio on. It's very rare that you'll listen to oldies unless you just switch over to it manually. And the news reports that happen will be between every couple of songs, and they'll be just like a little quibby. There'll be a little quick bite. And the 2...
And as effective as quibbies.
Yes, the 2 that I heard in my entire time playing the game was one saying that there was a bombing carried out in Amsterdam, and it felt to me like the game was implying that Seed's cult was behind it. And then another one mentioned a bombing in Kashmir, and I assumed there that was also Seed's cult behind it.
Well, Brian, it's so much dumber than that.
Yes,
it's so much dumber.
Because there's this thing that, like, the cult keep talking about the collapse.
Yes.
Right. And the collapse is what you might call a sort of Montreal-based video game developer's conception of the vibe shift when Trump got elected. Of like, oh man, it feels like it's going to go to shit. We could all die any moment. And there's this sort of crisis of legitimacy and trust and societal cohesion. And they're talking constantly about how the world is going to sort of like pass into this state of collapse because of Brexit and so on and so forth. And then as you put the sort of the speed cuffs on Joseph Seed, the fucking nukes go off on the horizon.
Yes.
and I throw my controller out
The
of the
nukes
window.
that don't go off in the other endings, which is again why I was assuming, it's the
Yes.
global cults nukes that are going off.
Well,
and
see, this is the
apparently
thing,
not.
right? Ostensibly, this isn't the cult, but what it is much worse and dumber and more offensive, which is that
Koreans.
the cult are right
Yeah.
about how
Right about
and this guy
everything.
does have magical powers
of premonition, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you have just
Yes.
immanentized the eschaton by finally
Yes.
arresting
Right.
Joseph Seed.
You have the right to immanentize your eschaton. If you cannot afford an eschaton will be provided for you. And so the North Koreans, I guess, just have on deck like a handful of nukes for, again, Montana. And Joseph goes, I fucking told you. I told you that
Right.
I was the Messiah and had like powers of foresight.
And then you get into a fucking car and you start
Car chase,
driving.
yeah.
To drive
And
one
you
more
wanna get to a
time because we
bunker.
love
You start
driving.
driving toward the mushroom cloud.
Yeah, because that's
Uh,
where Dutch Roosevelt's bunker. Remember Dutch Roosevelt? He calls you sometimes. He does
More
not
like
fucking matter.
Canadian Roosevelt. More like, we have to go to his bunker, okay?
Go towards the mushroom cloud.
Go towards the cloud, the mushroom cloud.
More
We
like
have to go and figure it
Canadian
out.
Maud Montgomery. That's who he
You know what?
fucking
It is like that.
Yeah.
It is like that. As you get to the bunker, your car fucking flips forward. Everybody dies except
you.
for Joseph Seed
Except for Joseph Seed
you.
Can't
and
be killed in a
you.
crash.
and you.
You're
yeah.
fine, and you go into Dutch's bunker, and Joseph Seed has.
Well, he drags you. You're like unconscious.
Right, yeah, you are brought into Dutch's bunker. Dutch is dead, and Joseph is like, now we're a cult of two.
He's like, we have like the entire time until the fallout dissipates of me being creepy at you.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the game.
That's
The game ends with him
everything
getting
you
back
did.
in your face. He gets too
Yeah.
close to your face
He's
again.
much too close to your face.
The game was quite literally rigged from the start. Nothing you did will have an impact. And yes, at this point, I get very angry and I sort of at the writer a lot of times until he
Right.
blocks me to be like, you piece of shit. You couldn't think of anything better than that because, right, I understand the process of writing a AAA game, right, which is that you already have a sort of a game design that becomes developed and you have these set pieces.
Right.
And then what a writer's job, what a lead writer's job is to take these things in and make a coherent whole out of them and link A to B to C. And clearly, in the course of Far Cry 5, what they have done is like, we want to do middle America cults, but not in a way that gets us in trouble, militias, but not in a way that gets us in trouble. We want to say something about like how everyone feels the vibe has shifted, and we want the next one to be a post-apocalyptic thing.
Yeah.
Right.
The leap from that to that last one requires you to go, okay, well, we clear the board entirely. But there are so many better ways that you could have done it. And all it would have required you doing is picking up one of the any of them. Like the fucking hallucinogenic drug that makes people see things that aren't there.
Right.
You know, the fucking brainwashing. Any of it. It just, anything that even doesn't suggest that this guy has magical powers, but because you want to do a sequel where he does have magical powers, you're just left with this thing that not only does it make the ending of this game extremely annoying, but it also completely forecloses this entire, like the whole previous, I guess, 5 games. And now that's done. It's over because it concretely ends because one cop tried to arrest shirtless Montanan Jesus.
I think it's so disappointing, right? There's so much potential. Like, I remember going back, right? Just sort of stepping back to what we were talking about at the beginning. I also remember watching that trailer back when it dropped in May of 2017, right? It was
very provocative.
It was provocative, it was organized, and I saw it and I just thought, I could be very interested in a game that actually tries to attack these thematic elements because no game has really tried to do this before, right? And I was like, well, it's a Far Cry game, so it's probably going to be a little goofy, but like, as long as these characters are kind of fun and memorable, as long as I am being given ways to engage with this world, that it doesn't even have to be a game with a specific agenda or purpose or anything. It just has to like look at the things as they actually are in some meaningful way, rather than just creating a weird facsimile of these things, sort of using just like the gloss of, oh, this is the American West and there are rednecks here. Like, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't say anything. And so many of the reviews that I saw that were critical were saying this exact same thing. And then the reactionaries on the other end, the fucking gamer assholes, the same people who care so much about ethics in video game journalism, were just like, well, how can you say that? How can you say that? How dare you you shouldn't want to put politics into the game. The game is just saying what it's saying, man. Why don't you just accept the game on its own terms, man? And it's like, but you're a fucking baby brain. You're not, you're looking at these very stupid, very elementary mechanics and story, both of which have been designed to appeal to the lowest common denominator without any meaningful perspective. And you are saying this is the most that I can imagine a game being. And if I am to want any more than this, then I'm a fucking, I don't know, woke cock lib SJW. I don't get it.
I could write a better ending for this off the dome that doesn't distort any sort of broader design decisions, right? That picks up a theme, and it would be very easy. Just pick one, right? Like you've already established the federal government is in like shambles. Fine, you arrest the guy, you take him to Missoula or whatever. You put him in the courthouse. You dust your hands and say, great, American sort of normalcy is restored, and fucking then the nukes go off, right? That's a better ending because it like is more holistic. But instead, it just everything about this it gets distracted and it leaves it unfinished, and it gets sort of like done in a hurry, and I just it annoys me so much because like again, I want the Ubisoft One World government, right? I want this sort of cohesive narrative where I can have my little like Altair like sort of like hood ornament on my car in the Watch Dogs game, and I can be like, oh, these things take place in a kind of like linked kind of thematic universe that's kind of fun to me, right?
Sure.
And for this, you have to like it puts you in a situation where not only do you have to make Far Cry New Dawn, which is a terrible game, but then you have to like have a setting that can no longer acknowledge this.
You have to have a multiverse now.
Yeah, you have to like Far Cry 6 happens in like kind of Cuba, and it sort of references the existence of this.
Yeah, you can see the American flag in the background has, instead of the stars in the upper left-hand corner, it has the cross of Eden's Gate. So the idea is that they took over America.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, look, here's the thing. Do I want a tattooed Rayman standing in the middle of Montana threatening me with a good time? Of course I do. We all want that. That is what the Ubisoft-verse that we want. But it is, these guys just aren't capable of dealing with like these hot button topics particularly well. At least they didn't for this game. I have not played 6, and I've heard it's a marked improvement story-wise.
I've heard nothing of the sort. I have heard it's a far worse game in many respects.
I put a lot of hours into 6, and my review of it, if you like, is that they fixed some of the obvious story stuff, such as like not dragging you to the compound for the monologues, but there are still monologues. I think it's mechanically a much less enjoyable game. Like if you think the enemies are like bullet sponges in this one, in 6 it is fully just like you are the hit points lowerer.
Like Destiny at this point.
Yeah, and you go around lowering everybody's hit points by sort of spraying rounds at them.
Ultimately, they don't seem to be having a particularly good time making these important games.
No, it's so rote. I've only played one of these games, and it felt like I was repeating something from another game already. It's
the definition of insanity. Yeah, I just it is sort of. Having OCD, right, fucks me in a number of ways, but particularly in relation to this game. Firstly, because it makes me like put a bunch of time into it, and secondly, because it means that I can never fully like chill about the fact that this exists in my beautiful walled garden one world Quebec government of video games anymore, because now until the day when they do something to retcon it, and I will pursue them on this until every single one of the fuckers blocks me, until they do something to be like, no, we made that up, or like the fucking Montana incident or whatever, then it just everything that you do has to live in a setting polluted by this, and it just really fucking annoys me.
You could retcon this pretty easily too.
Yes,
I think.
so easily.
All you would have to do is just be like, oh, everyone was on drugs.
Yes.
This was just the bliss. They all saw this nuclear explosion, and we caught them ranting and raving in a bunker.
Well,
Just
look,
one
One
of
of
them.
the other two endings is right.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. Here's what you'll never need to retcon. Your enjoyment when you, the listener, have completed an episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds, which
That's
you have
true.
just done.
Funniest time for the nukes to go off.
It's right now.
Alice, first of all, wanted to thank you again for coming on. Always
My
such a
pleasure.
pleasure. And somehow having this conversation made playing that fucking game worth it. So thank you for that.
That's the highest honor you could give me. It's always so great to be on, and thank you for having me. I had a great time.
If folks want to find you, track you down, whatever, what should they do?
Oh, so I'm on Twitter at Alice Avazandum. I do 3 podcasts that you mentioned way back in the beginning that they can go listen, and they can go find me on those.
Cool. Well, check out those links in the description. Also, check out the link to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/worstofall. We've got a bunch of premium episodes. We release them every other week. Last week, we talked about Donkey Kong Country, the animated series, and we're still recovering.
Most thorough deep dive anyone has ever done on that show. I guarantee it.
We're still recovering from that one, too. So our mental health is at an all-time high. If you'd like to contribute to it, feel free to kick us some coin on the Patreon.
So there's a moment when you come across a film director in Faith's part of Hope County, and that man's name is Guy Marvel. Do you get it? He's trying to shoot a movie version of Blood Dragon 3, which, as we mentioned before, was an expansion of a Far Cry game a while ago. And within the universe of Far Cry, I guess, is a film series or whatever, but it takes the gritty, realistic setting and, it makes it into this like neon drenched, playable 80s action movie. And you help Guy Marvel get quiet on his set, and he celebrates this by saying the following. Now I can finally spray my magic all over this film. Blood Dragon 3 will be a masterpiece. Seriously, it has to be. I can't go back to working on shit like Far Cry. I'd rather put my balls in a vice than listen to everyone with their fucking opinions about world building and player motivation and believability. Ugh, kill myself. I swear to fucking God. And as someone who has said that over the last 3 hours about this game, we implore you, for the love of God, just make Blood Dragon 3. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm Mickey Mouse.
Come on, man. He's the worst of all possible Brians, and I'm the worst of all possible Joshes, and we will see you next week.